Good evening. Welcome to our monthly agenda setting meeting. We appreciate your participation and interest in the proceedings of your local government. If you would like to have an agenda to follow along, they're on the table just at the outside of the exit doors and to the right. Those joining remotely may access an agenda through accgov.com. No final action will be taken on items tonight. Items discussed will move to our business meeting of December 4th for consideration and vote. If you have a cell phone or other electronic device, please turn it off or to silent. There'll be 3 opportunities for citizen input tonight. The first will be at a special call session. We have 2 items on that at that session. The second will be during the agenda setting portion, consent items 1 through 18, with the exception of 2 through 34, which we've removed, and then old business items 18 through 36. Citizen input is not accepted at our work sessions on the staff reports from the Planning Commission recommendations, which are items 37 through 41. There'll be a public hearing on these items at our December 4th meeting. Our rules of commission allow citizens 3 minutes for comment. There's a timing clock on Ms. Spratlin's desk, and it will turn yellow at 2.5 minutes. So please have your comments finished so that I won't need to interrupt you. If you have any handouts that you want to share with us, if you'll hand them to Mr. Berryman, he'll make sure that we get them. So now we'll move on to our special call session. Will you call the roll for us, Ms. Spratlin?
Dickinson.
Here.
Parker. Link.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Bailey.
Present.
Neesmith.
Present.
Dale.
Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Gertz.
Here.
And Hamby.
Here.
We have 4.
Thank you. And the purpose of this meeting is to amend the alcoholic ordinance to permit earlier sales on Sunday, and for earlier alcohol sales on Sunday, more commonly known as the brunch bill, and an E911 resolution, and any other item that is in proper order. So anyone that would like to comment on either of these 2 items, please come to the podium and give us your name and address, and let's hear from you.
That's okay.
Okay, we'll come behind the rail. And the first item on the agenda is the consideration, we need to suspend the rules. Have a
Motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Have a motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Hamby.
Sure. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the brunch bill, but I do have a question first, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor. There's been several inquiries from downtown and elsewhere around Athens, and it's my understanding that once we pass this brunch bill, once the mayor signs it, is when it takes effect. So my question is, and I'm not in any, sure, I'd love it if the brunch bill were to take effect this Sunday.
I know you want to have a Bloody Mary Sunday,
I do,
so go ahead.
yeah, or something. Can you give us an indication about when you might sign this bill?
Ms. Spratlin told me she'd have it ready, and I will sign it as soon as the meeting's over.
Okay, so certainly.
And it
if,
will be effective tonight,
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So this Sunday, restaurants will be able to,
Yes, sir.
afford the, all right.
Just to be clear, what it is.
The brunch bill would allow folks to be able to order a beverage of their choosing.
And be served.
And be served at 11 o'clock. Is it 11 o'clock? 11 o'clock.
In facilities that serve food that can also serve alcohol.
Yeah, a restaurant, yeah. So if you want a mimosa at 11 o'clock, you're able to do that.
If they have a Sunday sales permit.
Did we have a second?
I'll second that, and it was a 76% in favor. That was pretty clear. The people have spoken. And then we have an ordinance that needs to be read.
An ordinance to amend the Code of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia with respect to sales of alcoholic beverages on Sunday and for other purposes.
Okay, we have a motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, go forth and drink. And so now, the next item is the adoption of the E911 resolution that's required by HB 751. It's really just a formality. If anybody has any questions, I'm sure Mr. Berryman can explain it to you.
I move to adopt that resolution.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is there any other item that is proper to be brought to us tonight? So, entertain motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we'll move to our regular agenda setting session. And this is the time for citizen input. If you would like to address the mayor and commission on any of the items listed in the consent agenda, items 1 through 18, please give us your name and address. And as I told you earlier, we're removing items 2 and 34. So anything other than 2 and 34 on this
34?
consent agenda.
I missed that.
Seeing no one, we'll come back behind the rail. Any discussion about wanting to remove anything from consent agenda?
I have a question on number.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. On number 1. And let me just go ahead and say
Yeah,
the
go
question.
ahead,
So I'm hoping that we can get some media coverage on this because it's really close for Super Bowl Sunday versus St. Patty's is also on a Sunday and Cinco de Mayo. So since it's so close, if we could get some media coverage on that, I would like to get some more feedback because I don't think we even had 50% rate of return on our survey. And those that picked Super Bowl could have been when they thought the Falcons were going to be in there. But that's not happening. So anyway, if we can just get some confirmation on that. Did you have any feedback?
Some more coverage on
If
the
the-
survey instrument is out,
Yeah.
publicizing it more, making sure the community knows.
Yeah, and if we got feedback from some bar owners that said, I didn't answer the survey, are we able to utilize that even though it didn't come in with their alcohol license?
I think that's our discretion, isn't it, Bill?
Okay.
And, well, for Blake's enlightenment, I don't know if there's anybody else here, and you probably know, Blake, what this is we're allowed to have one Sunday that we have an exception for alcohol. Okay. And
Okay, and my other question is, now that we voted for 11 o'clock, can that happen? What's written in there now makes it sound like that one day, that one Sunday, it starts at 12:30. So is what we just approved overrule that? Can we make sure that the agenda reflects
good catch.
if that,
Well, the brunch bill will apply to restaurants that have a Sunday sales permit.
right?
The Sunday that's designated will apply to all other alcohol by the drink licensees.
And so does the 11 o'clock apply?
For restaurants?
Only to
The
restaurants
restaurants.
with Sunday sales.
And so the bars are set at the 12:30
That's
because that's
state law.
built into it, state
That's
law.
state law.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
we'll
if-
work on that for next year.
And as far as the establishment of that Sunday for the staying open later, will that apply to restaurants that sell alcohol?
Yes.
So there can be an overlap there. So, okay. Any further questions on the consent agenda? Yes.
Go ahead, and then I'll get my other one. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to talk about number 9, my favorite one, acquisition of private streets, and say how much I appreciate the work that the Government Operations Committee did and the work that staff did in the last few weeks to put this together. It's very well done. And point out to you that there's this money that they're spending is just materials. It's all they're taking out of T-Splosh. The rest of it is coming out of general budget, just people working. So I'm hoping that, and I'm going to ask the question about when this might start, because this is one of the first projects we had on the T-Splosh priorities list. It was scheduled to start in April of this year. And I'm going to ask the question as to when this will start. And then I have one other question about it, which is kind of important. It says that the ordinance that we're looking at, the budget we're looking at, says that the streets will not be acquired from their owner until after they're improved. But the Splosh referendum says that they are first acquired and then improved. So I need to clarify that, which actually makes sense to me that we would acquire the streets first through the quitclaim deed before we improve them. And the reason for that is I don't think we want to improve streets that we haven't acquired yet. And the other one, which is as important, is this gives relief to the property owners immediately that the streets are under county control before they get improved, repaired.
I thought that's a two-edged coin. If we acquire them and then don't have the money to improve them, then we have a responsibility for streets. So I don't know whether either one of our managers are prepared to answer that tonight, or are you? Or do we need to get the answer to the
we'd probably have to get back with you on those too.
Thank you very much.
Mike, then Andy, then come back to Allison. Yeah.
I was just going to make a comment, Madam Mayor, if I could, about Commissioner Neesmith's dogged approach to this Laurel Springs subdivision. And
Sorry I brought it up.
No, I was going to say the Laurel Springs subdivision should be really proud of the
absolutely.
way Commissioner Neesmith went after this, and is very persistent with it, and we just really got tired of hearing from him about it, which is why it's on the consent agenda. And so, at any rate, I'll go out there and make sure the streets are good to go myself if I have to, so Jerry will leave us alone. So
It's one of those nice instances where we found a way to do something that was the right thing to do anyway.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Andy, then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just agree with what Commissioner Neesmith just said. To me, it makes more sense to acquire the streets first.
Sharon?
I think she was ahead of me.
Oh, Melissa, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I have some questions about some other items
Okay.
on the consent agenda.
Me too.
Mayor, can
Yeah, same
I
with
kind of go back and address one of Commissioner
course.
Neesmith's
Yeah.
questions?
Can you hold a minute?
Just in terms of the timing for Laurel Springs. As you know, we're kind of dealing with this with Barnett Shoals to a certain degree. Temperatures are changing with the legal paperwork that will need to be, worked on. It'll be the spring when this work gets completed at Laurel Springs, when the temperatures get to where they're supposed to
I
be.
expected that. That's another reason. for
And
us
of
to
course,
see
we
if
want to
can-
do as quickly as we can.
That's another reason why we should go ahead and do the quitclaim deed and acquire the streets as soon as possible. And then do the work when the weather's right. That's what I'm suggesting.
Melissa, we don't normally do this with our consent agenda, but we might as well get it all taken care of. Go ahead.
I have some questions about number 18, the commissary kitchens, and the home occupation. It was brought to our attention that, some of these home-based businesses, we could enable some more small businesses if we allowed commissary kitchens as a home-based use. And I'm just curious as to I read the agenda report, but how the discussion came down to pass this out without any recommendations. And I wonder if maybe we could revisit the whole concept of home occupations to expand them and base them more on the classification of RS zoning. So, it might not make sense to have a home occupation like this in, say, an RS5 neighborhood, but in an RS25, it might.
Yeah, this is a little bit complex, so we'll
It
put this
is.
on the regular agenda, take it off consent.
Does anybody who was on that committee have any input on that?
I mean, we can do that when we get to the regular agenda, because I was just
Okay.
trying to get rid of things that we just had
Okay.
little quick things to deal with.
I'd like to remove 15 for discussion, just have some questions about the design.
Okay.
Number 8, Madam Mayor.
Number 8, okay. Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on then to,
Yeah, but just for now, I think.
8, 18, and,
Just 8 for me. I got my answer on 1.
but Sharon, which one did,
15.
and 15? 8, 15, and 18. Okay, so we will now accept citizen input on new business, which are items 19 through 36. Anyone have anything they'd like to talk to us about? Thank you. Y'all please remember our 3-minute rule. Hey, Tim.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner, and staff. I just wanted to speak briefly to item 29. Hopefully all of y'all, I sent out an email earlier today, and for those of y'all who didn't see it there, though, I just have concerns about pre-designating projects for the SPLOST 2020 list before they have gone before the Citizen Advisory Committee, which, of course, is created for that sole purpose of vetting, reviewing, and recommending which projects. This is not any kind of criticism to the specific projects that are on that designated list. I think there's some good things on there, and I support some of them. But more so to the process here. We've had a process that we've done many times over. It's worked. It builds citizen buy-in from the beginning, and of course, we're relying on those same citizens to actually vote for this and pass it. So I think that buy-in is very important. And I think by doing this pre-designated list, it kind of just shows a little bit of maybe distrust that they can pick the projects that are most needed and best for this community. And I understand that sometimes the commission is going to have information maybe towards what projects really are needed that maybe some citizens will not. That information obviously should be passed on to this committee. That committee meets many times. And I feel like if these projects are really the most important ones and the best ones for this community, that they will rise to the top. But of course, if they don't, we already have a process in place where the commission can then put those projects back on the final list. So I don't see the need to do a pre-designated list that, again, takes them out of actually reviewing those. Because, of course, there's 90 proposals put on there, and I feel pretty certain that this body has not read all 90. So I think it's best to make sure that all of them are considered. Oftentimes, the Citizen Advisory Council will combine similar projects into one really great project. By doing this pre-designated list, it could also hinder that happening. So I think we should just definitely trust the process. The process works. Trust the citizens of this committee, and go ahead and let them move through the regular process that we've had for many years, and that works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Anyone else?
Hi, good evening. Tommy Valentine, 395 Cleveland Avenue. Mayor, before I begin, I do want to make sure that what I'm about to share is permitted. I had been informed that there would be a public input section for item number 37 regarding the 110 West Hancock Avenue property, and had prepared a letter to be passed to the commissioners and a comment.
You can leave the letter, but comment is not appropriate now.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Do I just present
Give it
the?
to Mr. Behrman, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
That's all?
That's
Okay.
all. Thanks.
Good to see you, Tommy. Anybody else? Okay, we'll come behind the rail, and the first item, I believe, number 8 was Allison, okay.
Yeah, I was just hoping that the managers and assistant managers can give me some feedback on. So this is about us getting the tailgate station parcel, and we've got a friendly eminent domain for the paperwork side of it. But what I'm concerned about is on Facts and Issues 2, where on page 52, it states that the property being fenced and gated, that the intention would be to leave the property secured except when in use by staff, and that staff would limit the use of the property until the decision is made for long-term use. Can you guys summarize just what you're talking about there? Because the resolution that we're going to approve with that states that eminent domain is done for the enjoyment of the public and for the public's interest. And I just have a conflict with stating that the usage won't be till public.
Yeah, I think ultimately it will be. It's just until that section is really built out, we may have some controlled use, but we do envision it being used for a special event use, also just some general parking and staging for leisure services purposes, but also we're going to still utilize it for game day parking as well. We'll be selling raise revenue for spots there just during game days, those 6 Saturdays a year. But really, it would be, until we have a fully fleshed out plan as to what that is going to look like, right now it'd just be more of a secured and not utilized for day-to-day basis. But once we get it fully developed, or the idea is fully developed, then we would reopen it and it would be used for use.
Well, because when I read that there's 32 parking spots and we are in a need for parking over there, as everybody knows, the parking spot behind Mama's Boy, we have a hard time having that saved for Rails to Trail and Dudley Park. And at where this property is located, I'm all for us acquiring it, has one of our elaborate ADA ramps for people to access the Rails to Trails. And it seems like a perfect spot for us to have parking for the public. So it seems to me like we would just open the gates at dusk and close them at dawn, just like we do our other parking spots. So if you guys can look into that and see if it's a feasibility of what we need to do.
Sure, and I did speak to Director Kilpatrick, and he did say that, the park planning staff has already started working on some conceptual plans with the ultimate goal or idea is, say, if we're looking for designated parking spaces, we can fit approximately 50 spaces on that particular parcel. Approximately, so we've got to sort of flesh that out a bit, but it is the ultimate intent to have that particular piece designated use for the public to use.
And so maybe before the voting meeting, we can see what sort of timeline that's going to be, because I think that for me to be supportive of the resolution that goes with it, and maybe it's just because it's the eminent domain part, but to make sure that it doesn't just end up with it being our use, and the sooner the better for public access, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And for
Thank
whatever
you.
it's worth, anybody wants to know, it's a friendly condemnation.
Yes.
It's not a real taking, so. Okay, is that all with that one, Alice?
I guess leave it off till we get the further
Yeah,
details.
go on the regular agenda. And Karen was number 15, you asked that be taken off.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just had some questions. So, history number 9 talks about a concrete barrier, but I don't see that listed anywhere else in the design unless I missed it. It talks, if you read it, it says, the initial project statement was a request a multi-use trail in the bridge section maintain a 10-foot width and that a physical concrete barrier be added. But I don't see that later. I think they talk about a grass area. So I'm kind of curious if that's not still planned. So that's first question. The second question is, under facts and issues number 3, it describes the project and says that building new approaches, that the proposed project will consist of 2 12-foot lanes, a 5-foot sidewalk, and a 10-foot multi-use trail, along with a 3-foot grass strip to buffer the sidewalk and a 5-foot grass strip to buffer the multi-use trail. That's 23 feet of right-of-way on either side of those approaches. My question is, why do we need a sidewalk and a multi-use trail? If a multi-use trail can accommodate both, why do we have both? Got 2 more questions.
That's one probably they'll have to get you an answer
Yeah,
for.
that's
Sharon.
fine. I'm just throwing these out there. So facts and issues number 5, it talks about the alignment accommodates the multi-use trail and does not preclude future widening, but it doesn't appear that the bridge is going to be wider. So, how do you widen a road if the bridge isn't widened too? It seems like you'd have to go build another bridge. So I guess I just want to understand the thought process there. Are we going to build a bridge really wide? And then the last question was, has to do with rebuilding the signal, and I think that may be back up in, I didn't write that number down. I think it was back, it was in that, it's in that, rebuild, it's at facts and issues number 3. It just says rebuilding of the signal. My question is that, will that come out of the bridge cost, or is there a separate SPLOST fund that will deal with the signal? Is that all sort of considered the same project costs? I don't know if there's an existing SPLOST project that we could pull that out of, it would make sense. I guess it's all the same money, but just kind of curious where that money would come out of, so that's it.
You got the answers to all those, or you want to?
I think I might be able to bat 50%. So the signal for the bridge will come out of this. The money will come out of this bridge project.
The bridge project, okay.
So that's where that is.
All right.
In terms of the concrete barrier, really it kind of comes back to it adds over $80,000 to the cost of this project, and really is just not necessary or useful. It's plus really there is a safety issue by the time you add an additional concrete barrier, and you have to protect the ends. It adds another obstruction that really just isn't advised in these types of circumstances. So really just for cost effectiveness, safety, and then consistency also. If we do it on one side, we would probably want to do it on another side. So for consistency with other bridges, cost effectiveness and safety, it really just wasn't included.
Okay, that's fine. Well, it just seemed, it would seem like a lot if you had a concrete barrier and then 5 feet to buffer the sidewalk and 10 feet, 3 feet to buffer the sidewalk and 5 feet of grass to buffer the trail. It just seems like a lot of all of a sudden, it's like, what are we building? So I'm interested in those other two questions, too.
We'll get those.
Thank you.
And the other two, one was
About
widening the
why
bridge.
do we have a sidewalk and a multi-use trail? Because we're adding another 8 feet of buffer. Apparently, they're talking grass, not concrete, which is, if they've got a justification for it. And then how are you going to widen the bridge? If you're going to talk about widening the road, you can widen the road, but then you got to narrow back down for the bridge unless you're widening that bridge right now. So just understand that.
It's a new bridge.
We are. It's a new
So
bridge.
Well,
leave-
is the bridge wide, is the bridge 23 feet, 46 feet extra wide on each side? You got to have 23
There's
feet
enough
in
room
both.
for the trail.
So it's 23 feet on the,
I don't remember the numbers, but
Yeah.
it is wider.
well, okay, well, it didn't make it clear that it was wide enough to accommodate the 23 feet on both sides, and I'm just asking that question. We're going to have two 12-foot lanes, I think, or 10-foot lanes? 12-foot lanes, and then we're going to have 23 feet on both sides of that. So that's 46 plus 24, something, 70 feet or something. Anyway, I'm just asking.
Yeah, let's leave that on,
Thank
let's
you.
leave that on discussion so we can get an absolute answer.
Thank you.
And then number, which one was yours?
18.
18, okay.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from some folks on the Legislative Review Committee about the decision to pass this out without any recommendations.
Mr. Neesmith.
Yeah, and other members of the committee are welcome to join me, but essentially, the purpose of the home occupation permit is to allow certain kinds of business activity in a home without affecting the single-family nature of the home, without it being even noticed. And because of public, let me bring this up here right quick, excuse me for 1 second here. What number is this? 18?
18.
As in the agenda report, for example, you can't use the kitchen of a home as a commissary. It has to be a separate kitchen. And that includes food prep, plumbing, cooking equipment, storage, refrigeration. So it has to be a physically separate kitchen facility that cannot be used for residential use. That has an impact immediately on the nature of the home. The health department allows the entire house to be a commissary, but we don't. So the whole house cannot become a commissary only, which would avoid the idea of having to have a separate kitchen if the house was just a commissary. But that would also violate the intent of the home occupation ordinance. They must have their own sewer cleanout. The kitchen must have its own sewer cleanout with a grease trap and separate plumbing, and probably a separate septic tank if their own septic tank. So again, that has a profound impact on even the feasibility of a commissary in a home. Because a separate septic tank would also mean separate drain fields. And you probably don't have room for that. For food trucks, they must be cleaned daily at the commissary. Now, that's particularly problematic because that means that there's going to be a daily activity of cleaning that trailer at the home, which has an impact on the single-family nature of the neighborhood. So these were the kinds of things that just led us to believe that the commissary just does not fit in the home occupation idea because it doesn't preserve the idea that the home occupation is basically invisible to the neighborhood. This would not be invisible.
Mr. Hamby and then Mr. Gertz.
Sure. And I can certainly understand the part about it, that I can understand that part about the home occupation being invisible to the neighbors. I think when we first broached this, we were looking at an aspect, what if somebody wanted to build basically the size of a shed in their backyard, and could that serve as a commissary for the house? And of course, you'd need a home occupation license for that, amongst all other type of building things. But I think you've answered the question there, certainly if you're not on septic tanks. But I do think there's some other possibilities that might be available for what we're trying to achieve here, as far as increasing food truck vendors and allowing for that within both the health department regulations and with our own county stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can come up with. If this plan didn't work, let's figure out what a plan B is.
Let me just say that I was really optimistic about this idea. I fully supported it until the realities hit us. So just to be clear,
I think we
the
probably
entire
all
committee,
were.
the entire committee was.
Mr. Gertz? And then we'll get back to you, because they may answer your questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the rationale is sound, particularly when you think about a quarter acre, half acre, even 1 acre parcel, and imagining the light and sound and spraying that might be required at midnight or 1 a.m, after a truck may return from a festival or other outdoor location, and then have to have all the service that day. I do wonder, though, in the AR zone, if there would be some opportunity, should somebody have 5 acres or even 2 acres and have sufficient buffering to mitigate all of those things that I just mentioned, if that may be a prospect. I think about what some of our adjacent communities allow in comparably situated properties, and that may be an opening that I'd be interested in having some conversation about.
Yeah.
Ms. Link?
I'm on the same page. Like, I'd like us to, maybe even come up with some kind of special use permit process for this particular kind of home occupation that does take into account the actual size of the lot and buffering and the specifics of the activities that would take place there. I really feel like we need to do a little bit more to allow some of these small businesses the opportunities to even exist in the first place, especially as property values skyrocket, and it's getting harder and harder for small businesses to even open up here in Athens-Clarke County.
Okay. Well, Melissa, you want to let this go back on consent with no action, because what's being discussed tonight is a totally different conversation that needs to be put in the appropriate committee probably for next year.
Yeah, I'm fine with it going back on consent with the understanding that we're going to keep pursuing this.
Mr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Arid.
The only thing I was going to say is, I'm all in favor of people being able to run businesses out of their homes, but I think there's a fundamental difference between running a business as a tax accountant or something, and a business where you've got big food trucks and trailers being parked on a piece of property, every day to be cleaned out, and all the noise and the mess and everything else that entails. And we've got to bear in mind the rights of the neighbors to not be, not to be exposed to all that kind of stuff. So, there are small businesses and there are small businesses. So I think it's important that we bear that in mind if we're going to look at this.
Yes, sir. Mr. Smith.
While we're on the subject, I'll bring up a problem that we have that's related to this, and that is, right now, if you have a home occupation license, you're allowed to park 1 commercial vehicle on your property. If you don't have a home occupation license, you can park as many commercial vehicles on your property as you want. I'd like for us to address that.
That sounds like a good committee assignment, Mr. Gertz.
I know a couple of streets that Commissioner Neesmith may be referencing in Prospect.
Yeah, it does. I agree. It does need to be addressed. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, we're now going to move to item number 19, and that's the report from the task force that I appointed for the inclusion and equity report. Back to us, Ms. Link.
Yeah, I'm sorry Commissioner Parker isn't here, because her and I had some in-depth discussion of this. And I feel like the report falls short in many aspects. The fact that it doesn't make any mention whatsoever of land use and zoning issues, which have been used for well over a century to basically enable discrimination and segregation. There's no real mention of the role of the University of Georgia and possibly new policies or partnerships with UGA to kind of relieve some of the problems that we're having. And the whole revelation of discrimination issues came about because of bars frequented by UGA students that were blatantly discriminating. So I feel like there might be a commission-defined option in here somewhere to kind of instigate some further review as this moves forward. I just feel like it's woefully incomplete, and I know it sets up some new bodies to continue the work, and I'm hoping that we can specify the direction of that some more.
Mr. Kurtz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just kind of looking at the way we always manage these sort of reports that come to us, the recommendation here is to accept the report, and of course, that's what we do with many reports, including the recently accepted Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, and then, of course, implementation is the next step. And I think some of the steps that Commissioner Link is referencing are those implementation steps that really are a separate action, and certainly some of the things I think are embedded in the goals here. So, for example, if we want other community partners to be engaged, there is a partnership council that would ask some of our community partners to have a seat at the table and to help us as we move forward as an institution ourselves. When it comes to those land use issues and those kind of questions of greater opportunity, I think that would come out of a citizen task force saying, we want to prioritize these actions in the community, and them reporting to us that's a top priority. I mean, I agree that, as equity goes in this community, that's a set of questions that need to be asked about neighborhood stabilization and some other things. But I would want that to come from that group. I don't want to predetermine that through just an acceptance of the report.
Anybody else? Mr. Herod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything particularly substantive to say other than just to correct something on history number 6, where it talks about the November 1st, 2016 meeting, where it says, direct the ACC Gov Manager and Attorney to explore ways to create a more inclusive and welcoming community through the creation of a government-appointed Citizen Human Relations Committee through partnering with an established local entity. And there was a third bit, which was or through some other mechanism, and I just would like the record to reflect that.
Okay, before we move on, because I think there's a little confusion here, and I appreciate what Kelly just said, because we are accepting the report, and for every report, every task force that we've had since I've been mayor, we've accepted reports, and then we've had a committee go through those reports to, some parts, the commission's going to say, yes, this is appropriate. Some parts, they'll say, yes, but we need to do something. So what I had intended to do was to refer this to the Government Operations Committee, whoever that is determined to be by Mayor Gertz, for them to look at it one piece at a time like we've done all the other task force reports that we've gotten. So we'll accept the report under this language, and then it will go back to the GOC committee, or Legislative Review Committee. So I think that's where probably, I'm trying to decide. I'll decide by next week or by the December meeting. But I put it in one of those groups so that then they can vet it in pieces, see which pieces work. Okay. Item. Anybody else want to talk about this? Item number. No. Keep it on new business. Yeah. All right. It could go on consent. What's y'all's pleasure? Put it on consent, James.
With that textual amendment.
Yeah.
Correction, rather.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. Okay. Review of ACC Gov booting policy, and that came out of which one? Legislative or Andy? Yes.
GOC.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this relates to the issue of booting of vehicles on private property. And initially, we had had a recommendation simply just to ban the ability to do that because of some complaints we had had about basically cowboy booters, I suppose. And then we had some commentary from some entities downtown. And part of the reason, just to back up, was there's really no state-level regulations of booting on private property in the way in which there are towing. And so we had thought at the time that, well, the easiest thing to do to protect the citizens from kind of cowboy operators was to simply ban it. But after we received some feedback, the committee took another look at this and has crafted an ordinance that I think allows property owners to address the issue of vehicles parked on their property, but also gives much greater protection to members of the public. And so some of the things that it does here is it requires clearly identified signs. It sets a maximum fine or maximum fee for being unbooted. It requires that booting companies have 24/7 live people, that somebody, if you come back at 4 o'clock in the morning and you have a boot on your vehicle. So I think that there are some good protections here for the public. One of the things that we did talk about in our meeting, based upon some advice we had from our attorney, was about whether to place some restrictions on who booting companies may hire to come and boot and unboot. And the other committee members can weigh in, but my sense was that the consensus was that there may be some people that have criminal convictions for violent offenses that are probably not the people that we want coming down in a dark parking lot at 4 o'clock in the morning to take a boot off somebody and off somebody's car. And so I don't know whether the attorney wants to talk more a little bit about this recommendation in that regard. I know that Assistant Manager Justin had come up with the federal FBI definition of, I think it was 4 different types of violent crime, rape being one, murder being one, aggravated assault, and I forget what the fourth one was.
Mr. Bierman, would you like to clarify it for us?
Well, yes, a lot of times it's a vulnerable population that encounters the people who are removing these boots late at night, dark, alone. And so I think there's a public safety interest in, if the government is going to license these companies and these operators, there should at least be some minimal screening to try to protect against violent crime. And so that was the purpose of my raising that. The other piece of that was Atlanta's ordinance has a criminal background screening. We anticipate a lot of those companies are going to be working in Athens. And I think the last thing you want is the people who can't work in Atlanta because they have criminal records come over to Athens. So I think it's kind of a backwards concern that is there.
And what was that list of offenses that would not be allowed?
It's violent crime as, I just had it, here it is. Violent crime or crime involving moral turpitude. Violent crime is defined as murder, non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault.
Could we include child molestation in that?
It's not included there right
I mean,
now.
and it's not included there now, but is there any reason we could not?
Oh, no, you could.
Yeah, because I think that needs to be in it. So. And I don't know what the rest of y'all think, but you can chime in if you'd like. Mr. Kurtz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question about the details, about the signage. Under item 7F, requirements for posting signs, number 2 reads, signs shall be located at each designated entrance to a parking lot or parking area where parking prohibitions are to be effective. Where there is no designated entrance, such signs shall be erected so as to be clearly visible from each and every parking space. And then it goes on to say that there shall be no fewer than 1 sign erected for every 7 parking spaces. So is that 1 sign to 7 ratio just for those places where there's not a designated entrance? So if there's an entrance to the parking lot and there's a big sign that says, you know, alert, you may be booted if you overstay, does that cover the whole lot? And then it's only in these sort of no designated entrance environments that you have that 1 to 7 ratio?
I read it to apply to all lots.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to check.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, regardless of whether we have screened the booter and unbooter, it's still, if I'm in the parking lot at 4 o'clock and somebody approaches me to unboot my car, how do I know that person is the official unbooter. I think there's a opportunity for some serious abuse here, and I don't know how to solve it, except to ban booting. The other is using an example that we all know about, where you can't park in that parking lot unless you're patronizing particular businesses in a particular building. I overheard a conversation once the other night from tourists, and they said, I don't know what the Bottle Works is. I just parked behind something, and then I went, and then I got booted because I didn't go to the Bottle Works. I still don't know whether I went to the Bottle Works or not, and how did they know? So I think there's a confusion and an opportunity for abuse there that's concerning me. If it's a parking lot where you can park your car, but you can't park it unless you're patronizing particular businesses which aren't even on the same block, there's a problem there. So those are the two concerns that I have.
Obviously, this needs to stay on discussion, and I think some thought needs to be given to the points you brought up, because people have a right to protect their property they own, but also we got to protect the rights of the public, innocent public that might be abused. Andy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think Commissioner Neesmith brings up two really good points. And I'll be honest, my initial preference when we first looked at this was simply to ban it. But I think certainly there would need to be a requirement that whoever is hired by a booting company would have to have some kind of ID to show that they're working for that company. I think that would be fairly easy to fix. The second one, though, I think is a trickier one. And maybe we need to look at our parking regulations that say if this is a communal parking lot that's used by several different businesses, then that doesn't matter which of those businesses you go to. But I think those are two important points.
Mr.
Let me
Neesmith?
just address one, that's the booter must carry an ID. How do I know to ask for an ID? You know, I'm not from around here. How do I know to even ask? So I don't think that's really going to accomplish it. If I know to ask, and if he's got one, he's going to show me one. If he doesn't, then maybe he'll run and maybe he won't. Maybe he'll hit me over the head and take my money.
Maybe we could require a uniform or something.
Yeah, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Link?
I mean, there could be a protocol in place where when you call to remove the boot, they tell you the name of the person that's going to remove it, and when they show up, you ask them their name, kind of like when you call an Uber.
Or that the booter knows your name.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the boot?
Both.
Mm-hmm. Booter knows your name. Okay.
Yeah.
Sticky wicket.
Okay, we will move on to item number 21, and this is GDOT Local Maintenance Improvement Grant. Discussion?
Consent.
I have a very, very minor issue, and it's just because I can't find the money. So on facts and issues number 3, it says an additional $528 is estimated, I assume that's $528, is estimated to complete the resurfacing, but if you look at all the numbers, it doesn't look like there's $528 missing, so I'm just trying to wonder why that was even put in there. I've gone back over a couple times. I could completely be missing it, but I don't see it in the attachment and it seems kind of silly to be worrying about $528, but it's written there, so I'm just wondering where it's at and where it's going to come from, if it's that important, it was put in the agenda report. So.
Guys, y'all see what she's
Very
talking about?
minor.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, on the spreadsheet, on the attachment, it's not included. I think we're just saying that based on our calculations of what it costs to complete these roads, it's going to cost an additional $528. And yeah, we don't really
Say where it's going
necessarily account for it.
Like I said,
I
it
would
was
have
minor.
said, we would probably take it out of, it would be part of our match, and we'd just include it in our match.
So,
Kelly?
I'm just delighted that my personal pick for most beleaguered road in Athens-Clarke, West Hancock from Pulaski to Millage is on this list, and I'm happy to see it go on consent.
Okay. 22, consent.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
22 sidewalk gap project, and anybody want to talk about that one, Melissa, and then
I'm just happy to see Magnolia and Holman getting their sidewalks. People have been asking about them for years, and they're in the very near foreseeable future.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see that go on consent.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, and I think it can also go on consent. The section of Barnett Shoals, and this is, I think, Commissioner Harrod, you're on the other side, aren't you, on this section that's going from Lexington Road up to where Barnett Shoals turns right, or left is where Gaines School is. And I believe when this section of sidewalk gets put in there, that it makes that a complete street from that whole section there. So I'm glad to see that that gap has been picked up. And it also leads to a sidewalk to the side where Carriage Lane is. And as you guys know, the dead end of Carriage Lane is now a new greenway section. So that's, again, creating an active area of sidewalk leading to some of our recreational money and investment. I do want to add, just since we're talking about this section, and there was something in the agenda report talking about how it had just been paved, the road, and then now they're going to come in and work on the sidewalk. It appears to me that the bicycle lanes are much skinnier now with the temporary paint. So if you guys could make sure before they go and put the, thermoplastic final striping on there, make sure that the bike lane is, I think it should be 5 feet, or just make sure that it's at the standard it was before, because it looks like we lost a little width in that. But I'm happy for that to be on consent and happy to see that happening.
Okay, 23, SPLOST 2011 Project 7, which is bus stop improvement program. Any questions, concerns? Consent. Okay.
Does it matter that there's, some of the cost stuff is yet to be determined? Can it still go on consent without all the details in there?
Yes, the November 20th is actually when the bids are
Okay.
coming back, so that's reasonable.
So,
Okay,
okay.
moving on to item
Yeah,
24,
consent.
stormwater utility fee review. Anybody want to talk about that one? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I had some questions. I actually did speak to the manager's office, but to share, so on page 13 of the report that was, I guess, considered the attachment, I think it's just attachment 1. We got a table 7. It's a forecast of annual maintenance funding, but it's basically the maintenance for all of those options and not modeled out for each option or each scenario. So I just asked staff if they could model that. Otherwise, we're going to have to sit there and minus that. You know, they're trying to show us how much all this would cost, but it'd be good if we're going to consider it by scenario that we have that modeled for each of the scenarios, 1 through 4. Also kind of curious what the fund balance is for the stormwater fund. I did mention this to them as well. And if you look on page 14 of that report under scenario analysis, scenario 3, staff is recommending scenario 3, which is found under facts and issues number 9 on our report. And if I can find it real quick. I think my question is, it recommends that, so this would require that the fee go up to 502 to fund this scenario, but it mentions all other capital funded at 18 million. And if you look at table 8, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but if you reference back to table 8, where it talks about the near-term capital projects, the 18 million would appear to be the area-wide stormwater projects that are at 12 million. That's the master plan level 1 and 2 pipes, and the watershed management program at 6. But in our SPLOST package, I never saw I didn't see anything called watershed management program SPLOST for that. So I'm just wondering what that is. Like maybe it's under a different name. Just trying to figure out, if a project has been submitted. We got so many projects to look at to know what that is. And then my only other recommendation would be, I realize that staff says in the report, they reference item 9 in facts and issues is staff's recommendation, but then the actual option says mayor and commission accept the memorandum, and the memorandum references our consultant's recommendation. So I just think it needs to be a little more clear what we're actually recommending. Are we accepting the report? Are we adopting it? Are we doing this specific action? Or are they recommending that we implement, as they said in the report, scenario 3, and how that's going to be paid for? The only other question I have is, it's not clear to me, when you look on page 15 of the report, table 10, it offers some funding scenario results, and it talks about, our current fee is $350 or whatever for the average house. Then it talks about 502 or 601, but it uses fiscal year 28. My question is that fee recommended, is that the fee that's going to be in FY 28? Is that the fee that's going to be recommended from FY 19, F 20, 21, 22, all the way to 20, or is there some gradual increase? Like, what does that fee look like? Is it just wham, bam, we're at $5 immediately? Or is there some gradual increase to that? And we've talked about that in the past, that, we double our fees or triple our, and we talked about that with the sewer, septic fee or the sewer fees and stuff, is, phasing them in. So is the, so the question, first of all, is there a phase in, or is it just flat out? And if there is a phase in, what does that phase in look like?
Okay, staff, y'all got all that?
And I'll go over it again with them after, but those are my main questions
And
about
I
it.
think that needs to stay on discussion, since we got a lot of questions to answer. Anybody else on this one?
Just, just to answer just a
Yeah,
couple
sure.
of them real quick.
Sure, yeah.
I can't answer them all, just a couple of them. I did find out, with a SPLOST project, it's really, everything just combined into one project. We don't have a area-wide stormwater versus just stormwater pipes, and that, it's all lumped into one project.
So when they submitted 40 million for stormwater, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's all,
Oh, okay.
it's all
I hadn't looked
combined
back
into
at the
one
list since we
project.
got the original, so,
And then,
okay, so it's all one.
not to necessarily kick the can down the road, but for the last question, with the FY 28, and how does the additional fee get phased in, or does it take place in a certain year and so forth? That's really more for the phase 2. Remember, this is a phase 1 study about the extent of service, and the phase 2 is going to look at more of what that fee structure really looks like and how that's implemented. So I'm not sure if we really have that fully baked out quite yet in
Okay.
terms of the actual total how that would look over time.
The only other, I guess, comment to make is, if we were to all agree that scenario 3 was, that we wanted to support recommendation from staff, then I think we would literally have to designate that project for SPLOST, because otherwise we'd roll the dice, and, we might say, well, we're going to do this, and then we don't fund it, doesn't get funded, then we got to come back and deal with this all over again. So I think we need to, it seems like to me we would need to make that part of a designated project if we approve this. And I know it comes in order, it comes after that, but might be something to consider.
Yeah, I understand, and that is another item on our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have to be added, but you can have a chance to make your case between now and the voting meeting, so.
Well, I'm not sure that I want, scenario 3, I'm just saying if we were to all say that, I think we need to stand prepared that either if we don't say scenario 3 and we support it by designating the
Yeah.
project, then it's going to come back and you're going to have to readdress it at some point.
Yeah, well, a thought I had, and excuse me, just me, Kelly, is that those monthly fees or quarterly fees, are they monthly fees, right?
Yes.
Yeah. If that's phase 2, should they even be in this report?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So we can get those answered. Kelly?
I had a comparable question, and had some subsequent discussion with staff kind of about that question of whether this would by necessity drive a designated project within SPLOST. And the response in conversation with the Transportation Public Works Director is that if this was not a designated project, we simply would only do this component that's in the stormwater capital without the SPLOST element, or in a future iteration, we could have a fee increase on a monthly basis that would look different than this when we do the part 2.
And that's the reason to keep them separate, the 1 and 2. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, 25 is Regional Detention Facility Feasibility Study. Any discussion or questions on that one?
I just think, given the contours of this community with a lot of property that was built out in the 50s and 60s and 70s, this is a creative and wise approach, and glad to see staff doing some work on this. My hope is that we can apply the same concept to some other pieces of geography across town too, but this is a good first set of places, Lexington, Atlanta Highway, for example. I'd be happy to see it go on consent.
Consent, everybody, okay. Leisure services pricing policy. Discussion, concern?
It was a June work session, I think.
I'm sorry, Alan.
Consent.
I didn't understand.
I said consent?
Oh, yeah.
Does it look like it?
Consent's
it does
fine with me.
consent?
And this goes back to that, where we had the little pyramid of,
Improved pyramid.
yeah, okay. Okay, item 27, T-Splosh Project 6, Firefly Trail Creek Crossing Design Services Contract. Issues, anybody? Yes, ma'am.
So this is the, this is the basically the trestle. And there was a RFP that went out. I just have some questions for staff. Have these RFPs come in? And this is the contractor? I mean, I'm just like unsure of what the next steps are as far as determining whether or not the trestle is going to remain standing and how the community is going to have any input on that.
Yeah, I mean, so this agenda report is to procure services for design services, and the the agenda report references awarding the contract to Kimley Horn and Associates. Has been through the RFP process, and that's a recommended firm to do this. So this is really to go forward and look at some preliminary designs for what this might look like. But I will say there will be a public engagement process. If you look at, in fact, if you kind of look at Facts and Issues number 6, there's a little bit of an error there. Facts and Issues number 6, really the second bullet point, it says Mayor and Commission concept approval. Really, what we anticipate in April is to report on what some of the public engagement and outreach has been, and what would help define the preliminary plans of what that structure might look like. So really between now and April, there's going to be design, there's going to be some public outreach, and really to come back with something that would inform the preliminary plans.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can answer exactly what it's going to, that's why I can't answer exactly what it's going to look like today, because it's going to go through this process.
But the public input and outreach is definitely part of the next step.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Terrell?
It's into the scope of work by the contractor.
Ms. Terrell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to be clear, this is about the Trail Creek crossing, and in an effort to be as broad and inclusive as possible, the RFP did not specify how that creek was to be crossed. It simply asked for companies to respond to the RFP with some ideas. And so I guess Kimberly Horn and Associates were determined to be the most responsive of the bidders. So anybody who had any kind of plan for crossing that space was free to put in a proposal and to respond to the RFP. And we can only choose from those who chose to respond.
Okay, do y'all want this on consent or discussion?
Consent.
Excuse me. 2011 project, SPLOST number 22, and this is our Community Enrichment Facility Partnership. Would you like to talk about that, Mike?
Sure, I'll just be brief for right now, and if you don't mind, we can keep this off consent, just so we can talk about it more, because I think it's important to highlight about what we're doing, and at the voting session will be another opportunity, but I'd certainly like to thank Commissioners Wright, Neesmith, Bell, and Herod, for their work on this project. And it was a committee that the Mayor Denson put together to have us look at youth development money. It was part of a 2010-2011 SPLOST project that was originally designed for Boys and Girls Club, and Boys and Girls Club subsequently decided that they weren't able to, and didn't have the, they changed directions. and it opened up the door for us to reexamine this pot of money that the voters indicated and told us needed to go to youth development and family enrichment. So we had to certainly stick to those guidelines. We did that in the committee. We sent out an RFP that spelled out those guidelines, and we sent out an RFP that indicated that we wanted to see what some ideas could come back with. The RFP resulted in Athens Land Trust submitting a proposal and really submitting a good proposal, a proposal that promises to look at youth development, and not only youth development as it applies to how we're, it's not a youth development per se that gathers kids together to play in a park or whatever, but it's a youth development that has a promise to it of building a future for somebody who's wanting to learn in farming, wanting to learn in a young urban builders program. I mean, you go through what this RFP has laid out for us is a way to kind of I think act as a model for how we can do some other things in the community, and how we can use this model to provide the type of promising future that we want for young people and families, so that they can, I've always felt, and several of you heard me say this, that we can get as many caterpillars in town as we want, but when you have programs like this, and programs that allow for the small business development, and programs that allow for people to learn a skill or a trade, the businesses, the caterpillars, whoever may decide they want to go in a different direction in 20 years. But you still have an individual who's learned those trades, who's learned that skill, who has a plan B available to them, or a plan A if they want to start their own business in some sort. We talked about the commissary earlier. There's a lot of food vendors that go to the West Broad Farmers Market, and what this plan calls for a commercial kitchen. A commercial kitchen would allow somebody who's baking cookies at the farmer's market or selling some sort of product to be able to sell that into a grocery store. And that's huge. If somebody has a baked product that they're selling at a farmer's market and has a commercial kitchen afforded to them, they can then take that product and sell it at a grocery store. And grocery stores get credit for allowing that to happen. I think Bell's has committed to doing that with one of the vendors at the farmer's market already. And that opens the door to a lot of possibilities. In today's economic structure, I mean, you can take those cookies and sell them across the world. And that's important. I mean, it's not, I use cookies as an example, but I think y'all follow me. So what this does is it sets us on a path for an economy that is working for everybody. And I'm glad we're doing that. So, and I'm real pleased that the committee looked at the proposal and that we can move forward on designated this to the Athens Land Trust.
Mike, another thing it does too is these young people will be learning a lot of those soft skills
That's
that
right.
some of our large industries are having problems with filling jobs, because the people that may have specific skills don't have those soft skills, which are coming to work on time. Some of the things that businesses demand as well. So that's another.
And if y'all would indulge me to add something to what you're saying there, Mayor, is this project also allows for collective partnerships, because the Land Trust isn't going to do it alone. It's a partnership with the county, of course, and with the Land Trust, and the Land Trust is going to bring other partners to help with the funding. That was part of the key component of the RFP. We have this certain amount of money, but you're going to have to get some other help, and the Land Trust is working on doing that. So I think what you'll see is y'all remember the whatever it takes that we looked at several years ago. I mean, and the mayor worked on as well. I think what you're going to see is finally a collective partnership that gets moving on something, and
Pulls all the factors
pulls
together.
all the factors together. So it wouldn't be just a facility just for the Land Trust per se. They're going to bring the resources to bear to make sure that the youth and the family enrichment components of this RFP are well served.
It's obvious Mike and I love it, but I think there's a lot of other nodding heads around the room, too.
Yeah,
so-
I know it. I'll hush and listen.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that, this is almost $3 million in sales tax revenues that, was designated by the people of Athens for youth development activities. And the Land Trust is really the only organization that has the capacity to do with these kind of funds the most, and they have the track record of being able to do this, and their holistic approach to community engagement and community improvement is what really sells it. It's not just about youth development, but it's about community development. It's about affordable housing. It's about entrepreneurship, and it's about social capital. The way that these programs are able to bring people together from all different parts of the community, all different age groups, all different racial backgrounds, and form those relationships that don't always get formed in this community. The opportunities that creates, you can't really put a value on that. So I'm extremely excited about seeing this project move forward, and I do hope that the community partners out there that have been reached out to will take advantage of this opportunity to really transform our community and set an example that can be replicated throughout our community and beyond.
Do y'all want to leave this on discussion so the public will hear more about it? Okay. The next item is our SPLOST 2020 designated projects. And this is one that Sharon and I were discussing that that you were considering adding one to.
Well, I don't know that I'm.
Oh, okay.
I'm just suggesting that if we approve that, that might be something to
Yeah.
consider, so.
But I think, didn't we get an explanation, was it you, Kelly, that
They just would do it
wouldn't
without.
necessarily have to happen for these other parts of it to happen?
Madam Mayor?
Melissa, and then you, and then Mike.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of having these designated projects. I do believe that we have a Citizens Advisory Committee in place for a reason, and that they're the ones who are most qualified to vet these projects. And yeah, if we do get a list and there are things on it that aren't there, we do have the power and the ability to add on to it. We did that with T-SPLOST. And I also fear that, by bypassing that committee, we might lose faith of the broader community, and it's ultimately up to the voters of Athens-Clarke County to decide whether or not the whole SPLOST package passes. And I fear that, if we kind of ram some of these big-ticket items on there without the full support of the community, in the guise of that citizens committee, we could end up killing the whole package.
Ms. Neesmith?
I just want to clarify a couple of things about the history of designated projects. I don't know if it was done before the 2010 Citizens Advisory Committee, but it was certainly done then. We received a list of the designated projects, basically to get the message, Diane will remember this, we were both on that committee, that these are the things the mayor and commission have already decided they want to do. And so we actually recommended that one of them be taken off, but it wasn't. But the logic behind that is we're asking the Citizens Advisory Committee to advise us about projects that we already haven't, that we've not yet decided to do. And this actually makes their job quite a bit more straightforward, because what they have to do is fit the projects that they select, which is on a priority basis, into a budget. If they're fitting projects into a budget and the designated projects aren't already there as placeholders, and then we want to change that, it becomes extremely complex, and we actually end up taking projects off, a lot of projects off probably, that the Citizens Advisory Committee wanted to have on the list. So it's not a perfect process, but that's the logic behind it. And you can criticize it, but that is the logic behind it. I mean, I'm not really for all of these designated projects either. And when the time comes, we'll talk about them again. And that's probably after the Citizens Advisory Committee does their work.
Mike?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I've certainly looked at what we have here as an agenda item before us, and I am in support of the designated projects, and I am for a lot of reasons. I think what we've seen over the years in this mayor and commission and this government, I mean, we see some things that need to be done. We see some things that will impact our community over the next 30 years. And this is an opportunity for us to address those next 30-year needs. One of the needs is strongly supported by the judges in our judicial system. And I'll remind everybody, our court system gets about 60% of our property tax, or of our budget, rather, 60% of our tax dollars goes to a court system of some sort, or public safety of some sort. And a lot of people are served within our court system. A lot of people utilize our court systems, both good and bad. And we've got to make sure that the people and the judges that are using those systems are doing it in a safe environment, are doing it in a fair environment, and are doing it in a welcoming environment. I mean, certainly, you know, as the courthouse has been here for a while, but it has stood the test of time. But the future allows for opportunities for us to be able to look at different ways our court systems can operate, look at more efficient ways our court systems can operate, and those can allow us to save money in the long run as we move forward in trying to provide the services we need for this government. So I think you know, and the judges have asked us for consideration of this, and I think it's something we really ought to listen to, because they're the ones that work in the building all the time, and they're the ones that see the day-to-day challenges of this. So I think that project has a lot of merit, and it's something that we should strongly consider. The other part of the component is a government center. So the idea would be to build a judicial center and then utilize the courthouse as a sort of municipal government center. So you would still have government activity downtown. The advantages to having a government center, so to speak, at the courthouse is, one, you've got a deck that's attached to the courthouse. So certainly we see the problems here when people want to come to our meetings. I mean, as far as charging for parking goes, we see the problems with going to our planning department. I mean, certainly the older I get, and I'm about to be as old as Commissioner Neesmith, the harder I have in hearing. And you can't hear what's going on. Did you hear that, Commissioner? It's hard, it's difficult to hear within our planning department auditorium. You know, we're moving more towards televising our meetings. I think the Planning Commission meetings are a good one that could be televised. But making all these changes to an existing building, making all the changes that we need to make as far as making them energy efficient, are going to cost money. And what better way to save some money is start doing it on the bottom and go up. I mean, you can take what we're going to do, what we would spend to retrofit the courthouse into a municipal center, and make those changes needed to help us save money down the line. The whole point is not just to build these grandiose judicial centers or these grandiose municipal centers. It's looking 30 years down the road to try to determine what our needs are going to be as a community and as a government. And if we're building facilities that allow us to give better service, that allow us to save money and build safe environments, but also to you know, Commissioner Gertz and Herod may remember this. I mean, Commissioner Kimman always brought up the fact that, you know, our government sometimes works in silos and silozation. I mean, if you're in the same building together, collaborating, you hopefully would avoid some of that. And if you're in the same building collaborating, then a customer who comes into the building, a citizen who comes into the building, won't have to go from Satula to get their, here's what happens if you want a home occupancy thing. You've got to go to Satula to get your business license, then you go over to planning to get approval for the home occupation thing, and then you go back to Satula to make sure it's right. So, and I can imagine our staff goes to and from every building every day to do the work that they need to do. So if you have everybody there working together, that only makes sense. And it makes sense for a judicial center too. Our judicial center, you go downstairs into the municipal part of it, for those of you like Commissioner Neesmith who run a bunch of red lights and speed all the time, then you're going to be standing in line for a long time. And it's crowded down there. And the room, you just need the facility that can accommodate us 30 years from now. So I certainly think there's some strong arguments to be made for those two components. The other argument to make for those two components is what happens? Say, for example, we build this this government center, and we can free up Satula, we can free up the planning department, we can free up the water department. All of these public buildings then become available for opportunities for public-private partnerships. So I can imagine, if we're looking around City Hall, you have your water department building, you have, oh goodness, Bill, the name of your building, the Civic Hall, you have, and you have the Central Services Building, Simon Michael Building. All of those could become I'd kind of like to see them become a creative center for Athens and build upon that small entrepreneurship. And what better way to send that signal than buildings around City Hall? To me, that's a prime opportunity to develop those public-private partnerships that allow for economic development opportunities in the small business entrepreneurship areas from that. And I know Commissioner Bailey at one time worked on having Athens as designated and what was it, Jared?
Entrepreneur friendly.
Entrepreneur friendly. I mean,
movie friendly. All sorts of stuff.
Let's hang our hat on some of that stuff and get moving on it as well. And this will be a way for us to do that. So those are the options there. But another designated part is the affordable housing. Envision Athens. Big component out of Envision Athens. And these are the things, this SPLOST money allows us to start acting on a lot of the things we've been talking about. I mean, y'all see this. We can sit here and come up with the best ideas ever, because this community does come up with the best ideas ever. But we're not a wealthy community. And this allows us to have the resources that we need to move forward on some of these ideas that we have, and to build these public-private partnerships. The affordable housing component of $44 million, that is going 44, almost $45 million. That is going to make a big dent in our affordable housing issues here in Athens, Georgia. And what other community in Athens, in the state of Georgia, much less the country, can hang their hat on that and say, look, we have a serious problem, and we're willing to invest and make something good happen out of it. And this allows us, this only comes along once an opportunity. If we don't act on the affordable housing, if we don't act on a judicial center or a government to build upon, you got to look 10, 20 years down the road. If we don't act on it now, it'll be another 30 years before we do something. In the meantime, we're going to be patching holes in the planning department building. I'm still going to have trouble hearing what's going on at the meetings, and we're not going to be able to watch it on TV. And I might be dead, like Commissioner Neesmith just said, which is probably the case. So at any rate, I'm sure this will stay off consent because we'll have more to say about it later.
Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, I think, Mike did a good job encompassing the variety of projects, and I think Jerry noted just why we would have some designated projects. We don't want to play sleight of hand. We want to be very honest with the citizenry and with the citizen committee that have been so generous in giving their time to us, and say, here are the funds that we know that you have to work with, rather than having them give us a list that we then have to cull through very dramatically on the back end. I do want to make a couple of specific notes about some of these elements, though. What I would like us to do to extend Mike's conversation a little bit is be explicit about how we transition some of the properties that would come offline in their present uses. And I want us to designate those for the combination of providing entrepreneurial opportunities to raise the median wage in this community and to provide for affordable housing, and just make that very clear up front. There are a lot of moving pieces to this, but I just want that to be a piece of the headline. The other piece, and the one thing that I would differ in terms of the bulleted list is I would prefer to remove the structured deck as a designated project and just stick with kind of the surface opportunity to provide $11 million more for the citizen group to work with. So those are the two notes I'd make.
Let me get to Ms. Bell, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, I agree.
Having worked as long as I'd have on SPLOST, looking at the whole identity of what we're dealing with this next term, 2020, this is the first time that I feel like we have organized and envisioned and looked at what we really need to address. And what we're wanting to do with the courthouse, or what we're wanting to do with making everything more organized, is the first time that we've done a whole vision. And so to me, this is a perfect time to have the designated projects that's going to address those needs. Yes, it's expensive, but we need to do it. And this is the way to do it, is to have it accomplished.
Yes, ma'am. Mike.
And I'm sorry, I do agree with Commissioner Gertz that the structured parking deck is probably, I'd rather us get started on the facility and build the parking necessary for that without the structured. And that could be a project down the line of some sorts. It's not necessary to do that. And it does add $11 million back to the project list there. But I would also argue, and I'll put it on the table, and I'd hope y'all would consider this too. I know if we talked about it briefly at when we first came up with the set number, I guess. In my mind, there's not a whole lot of, well, there's a $30 million difference between a 9 and a 10-year one. And we did a 10-year one last time, and we were able to collect the dollars earlier. So I hope it's not too much to ask. Let's also consider raising the amount from what is it, 258 now or 248 now? And I think we got some information that said it would go to 278 if we went to a 10-year program. I don't think it's unreasonable to go to a 10-year program, because really, time flies, y'all. I mean, it flies, and it allows the citizens group to have more opportunities to also look ahead and see what those needs are going to be 30 years from now, and help us meet those needs. So please consider that as well.
So you may have opened up more questions than Mr. Neesmith.
Well, he did, and I agree. I think now that we've got such a chunk of designated projects, I think it would be good if we could extend either the time or the amount. I'm not sure which one this is. I think it's the amount, so that we have more money to do other kinds of projects. I think our citizens are hungry for more than just what we have on the designated list, a lot more. And I think we need to have the opportunity to do that.
Mr. Bierman, can I ask a question? Because Jerry and Mike just read a question for me. Related to 10-year, or rather related to time or dollars. Can it be expressed either or? That you either stop at 10 years or you stop when you get to a designated amount?
There's a special rule for consolidated governments. If the consolidated government has intergovernmental agreement with the other governments in the county, and if it borrows money, then it can determine it by amount, not by time. So you just would increase the amount to get the additional years.
So basically, we've got to do one or the other.
You've got to do money.
Yeah.
You've got to do money.
That's what we're doing with the current SPLOST that we're in, because all previous SPLOSTs were for fixed time periods, and the current one was for a fixed amount, and precisely because of what Attorney Behrman says, for some reason there's a quirk in the state code that allows consolidated governments to choose, which is about the only benefit that we have, it seems to me, in state code these days.
Anybody that didn't get heard that wants to be heard on this line? Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to make a point. So the item, facts and issues number 7, talks about an affordable housing development, and it just says that. It doesn't really provide a lot of detail or more descriptive wording, and it's not, I don't want the citizens to come away thinking that we're going back to the ways of the 1950s where we're creating a development that's just this will be a mixed use, mixed income type facility that would accommodate, would include affordable housing component, and or it could also include renovation of existing facilities that we have out in our community, maybe other apartment complexes or whatever. So I mean, it's sort of a bucket of money that could be used to provide for that inventory need that we have. So, and I don't know if, because this didn't have an intent, well, is the intent to have description for each of these? Because there wasn't. I don't, is there intent for the public to know what that means other than having to go digging them out themselves, or
I think some of this,
more descriptive?
go ahead.
I mean, of course, there were project description sheets completed, just like any other project the citizens completed. I mean, we could go back and attach what those project descriptions were to this agenda report, so there'd be more information.
I mean, I think it'd be worthwhile. I mean, it gives you a bigger picture. If you're not listening to this conversation, you may not know what that means or what some of these mean or whatnot, so.
I think it can be described, excuse me, to some degree, but like the affordable housing element that you referenced, I think it needs to be fleshed out to say it can encompass these things. Because I think when you say affordable housing, many people just think public housing. That's their image of affordable housing. But this is workforce housing. It can be mixed income housing. It can be a whole plethora of things that improve the housing stock of our community. So, Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, I agree that we should, I think we should have a description rather than these rather fuzzy lists of this project and that project. And it'll also give us an opportunity to work on those descriptions before they get too far down the road. Now, I would like to have that opportunity, and it's going to be hard to get done between now and the 4th of December, but
Yeah.
I think we do need to see those descriptions.
Well, I'm thinking a lot of this is going to be hard to get done by the 4th of
Yeah.
December, so we got to work on it.
Well, I mean,
Or just direct our staff
or
to
come
work,
up with
which is
another
what we always
plan
do.
so that we can pass this or delay this, or anyway, get to the point where we're looking at the project descriptions for these designated projects, so we can agree on it. That's what I'm thinking.
Anybody else before we move on? Okay. We're on number 30 now, which is the Legislative Review Committee, and this relates to the prohibition of dockless shareable mobility devices on public property. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. The Legal Review Committee has been working on what to do about dockless transportation, currently Bird, and really have come to the conclusion that we can't put legislation in place that solves the problem. We just can't just suddenly do it. That what we need to do is, first of all, ban all dockless rentable equipment for 12 months. During that 12-month period, we will work on an RFP and legislation and the definition of a pilot program so that we can issue an RFP to bring in one or more vendors. And this might be for motorized scooters. It might also be for rentable bicycles, shareable bikes, either electric or non-electric. But we want to get ahead of this problem. We have a lot of cities who've done this, who are doing what we're saying we're going to do. So we have a lot of models and a lot of experience throughout the nation that we can learn from. So at the end of the 12 months, we would issue this RFP, or perhaps before the end of the 12 months, and we would pick one or two or some number of vendors to provide some number of dockless transportation means, and we would have an agreement as to what they're paying us, because this is going to cost money to enforce the laws. But we're only going to give them 10 days. After we pass this, we're only going to give them 10 days to come get their stuff. And after 10 days, we're going to impound it, like the University of Georgia has been doing. We don't have the impound rates on this legislation yet. I suppose it'll be on there by the time we get it next month. And I think, unless somebody in the committee, particularly Commissioner Wright, who this is something that she's very much paying attention to, has anything to add.
I think that summarizes, I think, one of the main things that we learned, and I think we've had it for 4 months now, and by the time we would meet, there'd be new things to learn. And so we thought it was advisable, and this is for the health and safety of the community, the users, as well as those pedestrians where there's conflicts with it. I think we all can remember how important it is to have our sidewalks clear for people to walk, and this is a hazard in a lot of ways because the riders and the company are not working as hard as we are to follow the rules, which the category of the ones in example here, the bird scooters are motorized vehicles, so they're the same as a sit-on motorized scooter as to wearing helmets and where they can ride, which is not on the sidewalk or parked on the sidewalk. And so that, as I think we all have seen, is not happening. So we're going to do this and continue to look at what some of the best practices are and what good partners we can have in the companies that can bring this alternative transportation safely into our community. So that's the goal of this temporary ban.
Mr. Harrod, I apologize. I should have
fine.
called on you already, and then Ms. Link.
So just a couple of quick things. I know that the university has been impounding these things left, right, and center, and the company's not coming and picking them up because it's cheaper for them to drop more scooters off than it is to pay the impound fees. So, and I don't know from a legal point whether we could put into any kind of ordinance an option that if the company does not come and pick these things up from having been impounded after a certain period of time, we're free to dispose of them as we see fit. Seems to me that they've abandoned their property. So I would like to see that included in there somewhere. Because I know that UGA's got literally hundreds of these things
1,100.
sitting in a parking lot somewhere. The other question does relate to UGA. So UGA just went ahead and banned these. Do they operate, are they able to do that because that's state property and we're not state property, or how did that work, Mr.?
That's correct. They've got more control over, since the whole campus is government property.
Okay.
They've got a lot more control over it
Okay.
than local government does.
Okay. I did see 2 UGA police officers about 3 weeks ago ticketing 2 students that were riding these things down East Campus Drive, and they looked a little bit surprised that they could get a ticket for riding these things. So I don't think Byrd has been particularly forthcoming in telling people that use them that there are certain rules and regulations to the road that you need to follow. But certainly in terms of the impounding, whatever we do, I would like to see something in our ordinance that says after a certain period of time, these things are considered to be abandoned and we can dispose of them as we see fit. Maybe we can, I don't know, take the motors off and give them to some local nonprofit for kids to have scooters. I don't know, but I don't want to have them sitting in a piece of property of ours for months and months and months, taking up our space because Byrd is irresponsible.
Ms. Link.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one behind the rail who actually uses these from time to time. And they are definitely a convenient form of transportation for someone like myself. I can't ride a bike anymore. I have vertigo issues, but riding a scooter, those don't exist. There's not all the motion associated with riding a bike. So I really love them, but I understand that it's anarchy out there. I mean, I've seen people do some really, really stupid things, and I feel like it's really irresponsible of the company to not have come to this local government first to come to an agreement on how they were going to do business in this community. We're not making any red scooters. There should be some taxation. There should be some registration. There should be some accountability. When things do go wrong. And yeah, they are being left in the right of way. I mean, I was walking over here just before meeting this afternoon and had to move around a couple where the sidewalk was only about 1.5 feet wide. So someone who was disabled or pushing a baby carriage wouldn't have been able to pass through that part of the sidewalk. There need to be some rules. And I don't like the word ban, but definitely a moratorium on the operation of these so we can set some rules in place. I don't know if a full year is necessary because there are plenty of other communities who have come up with those rules. So yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings because I do love them and I feel like there is a place for this kind of transportation in our community and it definitely helps relieve auto transportation. I mean, there are plenty of times when I probably would have called my husband for a ride, but instead I hopped on a scooter. And so I do have mixed feelings, but I do recognize the need to create some rules and to see that, they're using our public streets. And so there should be some revenue produced that the public can benefit from in the operation of this business.
Mr.
I just
Neesmith.
want to point out that I don't anticipate that the public is going to benefit from us charging the rental companies to put them on in our county. I think we're going to have an increased enforcement cost, and that's what we're trying to cover when we start charging for these. Perhaps there'll be more than what we take in, but I kind of doubt it.
Okay, move on now to item number 32, which is, 31, solid waste collection rates for residential and commercial customers. Anybody want to talk about this?
Title only, we didn't get a report.
Oh, okay. Have nothing to discuss yet. Okay, we'll talk about that at our voting meeting. Amend the Code of Ordinances regarding promotion and review board and personnel hiring officers. Where did this come on? Where did this one come from, Bill? Just from staff?
This has come from HR.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think it came out of a committee.
We put on consent?
Oh, okay, it's consent, okay. 33, Shoal Creek Farms Dam renovation bid award. Any discussion and concerns about this?
We don't
Consent.
have the dollars. I understand we're supposed to have that information though before the December 4th. So this is something we've been working on, y'all. My fellow commissioners may remember that there's an assessment that the neighbors in that neighborhood are paying in order to pay their share of the cost of that. So that's what this is
Maybe
about.
we'll leave this on discussion.
Yep, hiring the contractor. Do the
Okay.
work. Thank you.
34 is, we have removed from the consent, from the agenda for
It's
now.
out. I missed that.
Yeah. And 35 are parking meters at handicap spaces. Mike, would you like to
I can
tell us about
address
that?
this or try to address it.
Yeah.
No,
Were you at that meeting?
No, but I'm aware
Okay.
of what.
Well, if you
what
miss
was
anything, I'll
on.
let you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
I didn't think
if I
you were
mess up,
there.
let me know.
Yeah.
But this is a request that's coming, ADDA manages parking downtown, a request coming from the ADDA. And this was voted on at the last meeting. And what this is asking is, right now, we have roughly 20 or so parking spaces for people with disabilities. And this, about out of those 20 or so that are available, only about 4 are metered. So the request is to just remove those 4 meters from there. There still is the requirement, as you see in the agenda report, the requirement that the 3-hour time limit be adhered to. And there's a 3-hour time limit for if you're parked in a spot, handicap spot. You also have to have all the appropriate decals and such as that in order to be able to park there. Of course, that's a state law, and we do enforce the state law. So this is just something to bring into conformity all the spots downtown for people with disabilities.
Another part of that discussion was to ask our meter enforcement people to be very diligent about enforcing that, the 3-hour parking
3
there.
hours, right.
And also make sure that they are handicapped accessible, or handicapped vehicles that are there.
Right, exactly. And another point I will bring up too, Madam Mayor, is in the same agenda, it allows for us to, right now, we currently do parking services on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and also, I believe it's Memorial Day.
That's on consent.
And that's on consent. That's a different agenda item.
We separated.
Yeah, we separated.
There's so many agenda items tonight, I'm getting confused, so.
We thought it would be less confusing
Yeah.
if one was on the consent agenda. So.
There you go. Well, this shows so much for that logic, doesn't it? So, and I'm fine with putting this one on consent if y'all want to go ahead and do that.
Do you want?
Yeah. Well, the reason, I guess it was my inquiry about it in the agenda review, that I had them separated, was because I've had business owners in downtown that were very frustrated because their handicapped patrons could not come and use handicapped spots convenient to their business because somebody parked in it all day, and they wanted to know why aren't there meters in the handicap spots. So I wanted to separate this so I could learn more about it, and some of the things that you said did cover what I was concerned about. One, they would likely need more than the 2 hours. You'd want to give an accommodation for having more time to get back. And is that specifically stated on the sign that it's a 3-hour limit?
It's, I don't believe, it may be stated on the sign. It's part of our local ordinance, so that, it may not be on the sign, but it could be.
So instead of trying to learn more now, I want to learn, I'll research a little bit more to find out how we can make that, because I do want it enforceable, because they talked about how the same person parked there every day, so it was a handicapped individual who worked downtown, and so then they used that spot all day, and I know that we also don't want campus activities that are all day long to also be using the parking spots.
Yeah, and,
So-
and I think in those instances too, I mean, certainly, I believe those are probably few and far between, but in those instances, I think a little bit of discretion is advised in the fact that maybe it's best that our parking services may go talk to the person who may be doing that and just let them know the regulations, or talk to the employer who may be doing that and just let them know. Sometimes it's best just to go be neighborly and friendly and figure it out from there, and then go from there, or help them find some other accommodation that might help them be able to do their job downtown, and find a place close by that they could park at that would be accessible for them to get to that job.
Right,
So,
and I think too, for that business in particular, understanding what to do and who to contact. So it might just be communicating after this is approved, the details that you're talking about, so that friendly communication and approach can be effective.
right.
Ms. Bell?
I don't want y'all to laugh when I say this. I've had 2 people to come to me about parking meters where they're not quite tall enough to reach. Now, I'm 4'11" and a quarter, so I qualified and I'm okay. But this was something, if we're going to be doing some reviewing on this, let's look at height of the parking meter for the handicapped situation. Pardon?
For people in wheelchairs.
For people in wheelchairs, but then other issues.
Well,
Yes, thank you.
Well, I'll make a statement, because right now I don't use parking meters very much, or I use them, I don't pay for them. Because we
That'll
have
change in about a month, Madam Mayor. I hate
It's
to
going to change.
disappoint you, but.
It's going to be one of the things I miss the most. But I know in the self-service gas stations, sometimes I can't see the printouts because I'm not tall enough. And I don't know whether that's the case, whether I have to look at our parking meters closer to see where our verbiage is, to see if you have to be looking down at it in order to see it. So, Mike?
Well, I was just going to bring up a point that I think this is something that was discussed as well, and perhaps it's something we can look at as we go and look at the streetscaping for Clayton Street to determine the height of the parking meters. I don't have a problem with it, but it's just me. So.
I'm okay for this speaking stuff, or you want to keep it on discussion?
I guess I'll just, Mike, Commissioner Hamby, will you commit to work with me and ADDA so I can make sure that taking the meters off of the handicap is still getting the enforcement? I'll put it back on consent if you and I can continue to work on the implementation of it with ADDA.
Sure. I
And
know that'd
the
be
fact
great. And
that
Chuck Horton would too. I know.
I thought I thought that it was also trying to address the fact that our parking meters at the handicap sites are not ADA compliant.
Right.
So, but if there's only 4 that are metered out of the 20, I see why you're switching to take them all off versus add them all on. But I think that when we do the new ones, I think we need to be mindful of what is a more appropriate average height.
Right. Well, we need to be, certainly what you brought up as far as making sure that 3-hour time limit and helping to find accommodations that meet the needs of people who are working downtown.
So consent's fine for me.
Okay, our last item before we go to our planning items is the review of boards and authorities and commissions handbook that our staff has worked very hard on, and Mr. Neesmith must have a question or concern.
I think this is an excellent document. I think it's very sorely needed so that the commissions, who are very fluid in their membership and chairmanship, have a ready-made document to know what their responsibilities are. I do have a little concern, though, about the fact that for each of the committees, there's a list of members. this is going to be a very difficult document to maintain. I would suggest that the membership be taken off of these pages because they're going to be pretty stagnant, the description of what a board does. And if we want the members, then they should probably be a separate document or appendix to this document, or just online, a URL if people can go look at.
Yeah, just reference.
Otherwise, this document is going to be out of date within a few weeks.
Good point. Andy?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So the Government Ops Committee talked about this at our last meeting, and its origins come out of an audit that was done a year and a half or so ago, suggesting that we have a little bit better training, I guess, for some of our members we appoint to boards, authorities, and commissions, not least of which is to specify what some of the duties of the particular boards, authorities, and commissions that they will be working on. So I think this is a good document. I think that Commissioner Neesmith makes a fair point, because we do interviews for these twice a year, and so that means at least twice a year some kind of paper form of this would need to be updated. So I think there's wisdom in what he says. That's the first. But there's wisdom in what he says of maybe just taking out the members and when their terms expire, and maybe perhaps just having them on our website, that then it just needs to be changed and nothing new needs to be printed or anything like that. But other than that, I think this will be very helpful, both to members of BACs and even to some county commissioners, perhaps.
Okay. And can you pass that on?
Oh, yeah, certainly. It's a good idea.
I have some,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah. I mean, I foresaw this as basically being an online document where those members would, change as they came on and off the board. I am not ready to pass this. It was just brought up at the Government Operations Committee meeting last Thursday, and that was the first time it's a 42-page, fairly dense document, and I feel like it hasn't gotten proper discussion. I mean, it's taken us, 5 months to pass a booting policy. I really feel like this needs more discussion. I especially have some concerns about some of the summary of expectations. We've got a whole page and a half or so here. I really feel like that needs some more nuanced discussion. I certainly have more questions about it and would like to discuss it with the committee. I couldn't stay for the whole meeting. The meeting was kind of called at the last minute, and I had a prior commitment. I know Mike wasn't there at all.
Hey, now.
Oh, because it was a meeting that wasn't supposed to happen, and it was called kind of last minute, specifically to discuss this document, and I just don't see what the rush is. And I really would like to see this go back to committee, and I also understand that members of these boards and authorities have not been consulted. I've had some communication with a couple of them, and they were like, we didn't hear anything about this. I really feel like there could be some more pragmatic input from the folks who are serving on those committees. And because these committees all have, a lot of them have some very different roles. I feel like this kind of one-size-fits-all summary of expectations, it could really cause some problems. I really just feel like we're not ready to approve a 42-page document that's only gotten minimal vetting. I mean, do you have anything to say, Mike?
Yeah, I'm trying to read the sign language.
Sorry.
I think Commissioner Wright had her hand
Yeah,
up
and
first.
then Andy.
Yeah. I like that this is coming forward. I realize that this is coming together now, but yet we've been studying this through the audit from the boards, authorities, and commissions over and over and over again, and this is like the grand finale to that, and our desire to be able to know this. I think this is a document that when I'm interviewing people, it would be very helpful to flash over and see the duties and responsibilities. I kind of like the idea that the members are listed and their expiration date, because then somebody can look at a thing and say, oh, so-and-so's rolling off next year. It kind of gives you a little bit of a forecast of when a position's going to be open up. I believe that we shouldn't spend money on printing it yet and keep it digital, because like for the Board of Tax Assessors, Jeb Bradbury, we've already reappointed him, so his would already be updated from the last. So the fact that we need to keep it current might be the reason why it doesn't get printed for the same thing as here we are going to vote on it December 4th, and it's titled 2018. So I think it needs to move forward to help the groups and to help us with the groups, and then knowing that it's going to be continually updated, whether it's content or just names and dates. So I'll be ready to move it ahead, knowing that it's still going to be worked on.
Mr. Herrick, then Mike,
Well,
you've
I
already
mean,
spoken. I'll get him. I'll get you next.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, just to respond, yeah, it is a big document, but we have been talking about this for a long time. 3/4 of this document is just, I don't see what's controversial about anything in this document, but 3/4 of it is just literally listing what all of the boards, authorities, and commissions do. So I just picked one at random. Hearings Board, members, 7 members. Term, 4 years, limit 2 consecutive terms. Authorizing legislation, meeting information, major duties and responsibilities. I mean, what is there to discuss about that? It's pretty straightforward. And the rest of the stuff is just kind of a general, these are some general expectations that when you're appointed to a board, authority, and commission, these are some general expectations as to the way that you should behave when you're on them.
Mike?
Well, Mr. Neesmith hadn't spoken yet either, but I'm going to come back to you.
Oh, I haven't either on this.
Oh, I
issue.
thought you had.
No,
Okay.
I sure haven't.
Well, that was you and Allison sending
I
smoke
shouldn't have made that
signals to each other.
snarky comment about the parking, should I?
Okay, go ahead.
So, I'd just like to make it clear for the record, I was at a doctor's appointment in Atlanta, which is the reason I missed this meeting. Made it sound like I was
You didn't
just,
bring a note,
make
didn't
it
you?
sound like I was skipping, going for the brunch bill early or something like that, but that wasn't the case. And I do want to say, certainly most of the document does include descriptions of the board and authorities that we currently have. I kind of do admittedly agree with Commissioner Link a bit. I'd like the fact that our boards and authorities each have their own sort of feeling about each other. And this is kind of bringing some sort of standard to that. And I understand you need to do that on some, but, like page 11, for example, orientation and training. Right now, both economic development authorities, the IDA and the EDA, have to go through training already, state mandates that they go through that training. The same for the Downtown Development Authority, has to go through that mandated training. And this, I think, just adds another level of training to that component of it. I was thinking this would be just more of a document describing what our different boards and authorities were and what their responsibilities are, rather than laying on extra requirements for our boards and authorities from that standpoint. Because that's why we have boards and authorities. We put the citizens on there. We put them on there knowing that and hoping that they are doing the right thing by us, and they have conflicts of interest, disclose it amongst the board and as an example, and such as that. So, I mean, I know the authority, every authority I've come on, there's always been somebody that may have a conflict of something. They disclose it and say they have a conflict. Hey, and you go about it from there. So I just, certainly a handbook that lays out what our memberships are, how do you go about applying for a board of authority, but having all these other requirements in here, I'm not too sold on just yet, but it just may be me and Melissa or Commissioner Ling. So.
Well, I mean, I see this process of adopting this document as an opportunity for education of our boards and authorities, and also for potentially some improvement of the document in that process. So I would like to see us submit this document to each board and authority and committee for them to review it and give us back feedback. That will accomplish 2 things. It'll make the document better, and it will educate them. Because I know I've been part of these committees where they didn't know they had to keep minutes. They didn't know they had to publish. They didn't know they were subject to the open records or open meetings thing. So I think this is an opportunity to educate, not just document. So I'd like to see us extend this process by sending this document to them for their review and then come back to us.
Of course, another thing it does is give potential members who are interested more information about it before they apply.
Well, sure.
Mike?
Yeah, I was just going to say one other thing, and maybe we can do this, I'm not sure, but, some of these authorities are independent authorities. The Downtown Development Authority is, the Economic Development Authorities are. And can you require an independent authority to go through some additional training? That's a state mandated authority. Can you require them to go through additional training like this document is proposing?
Well, that may need to be clarified, but I don't think it was ever intended to be additional training. But
I think it is. From what from it's on page 11
yeah, I'll look at it.
of the
again.
document.
It may not be ready for
Well, that's the kind of thing we
prime
need to
time
review
yet.
for.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I just think there needs to be a lot more discussion of it. And, I just don't see what the hurry is. We're not going to be putting a call out for new members of these boards until, April, May or so? So there are a few months to tweak it and to reach out to, former members and existing members for their suggestions. I mean, I just don't think I think it's a little disingenuous to create this document without reaching out to those folks who have actually served on these boards and getting some pragmatic input from them.
Yeah. And the idea of sending it to the boards is a good idea, too.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems like there are really just a couple of key things that people want to make sure get disseminated. I don't think it would take us a long time to create any revisions or finessing of the language. And even within the training language, that there's this caveat that alternate trainings as the manager or attorney see fit could be utilized. And I would see some of those state mandated trainings or other kinds of things that we go through as fitting into exactly that box. But the great thing about this is that this formalizes and professionalizes a lot of the work that we're asking citizens to do. I think probably all of us have sometimes sat in that room downstairs in City Hall, interviewed people, and then at a loss when asked, well, exactly how is this meeting run? Well, this is going to ensure that we've got some formal minutes from those meetings, that those things are accessible, and that those things can be broadly distributed. So at its core, this does a better job promoting the work of government. So maybe a couple of little things to modify or finesse, but I think by and large, a great document.
Well, at whatever time it's adopted, it's a dynamic thing. I mean, it can be changed as the mayor and commission see fit. So. Okay, anybody else? If not, I'm going to move my chair back so we can look at the planning things.
We were looking for Brad.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. We're actually glad Brad's not here. This can be a little long-winded.
I saw Brad do that, and he said he was very happy.
You can
not
throw
to be
darts
here.
when you want to.
But,
Okay, Rick, we are ready when you are with the first item, which is, got to get back here so I can see it now. Close my book. $37, which is Athens First Methodist special use permit.
Okay, we have, ready?
Yes, sir.
We have three land use cases before you tonight and two text amendments. The first case, it's not government-sponsored, is coming from the First Methodist Church for a special use permit in the CD, Commercial Downtown District, to allow for a surface parking lot at 110 West Hancock Avenue. Yeah, I think everybody's pretty well familiar with the site. It's about a block away from here. The building's called the Say Building sometimes. It's been there about 100 years. A part of it has been there about 100 years, like the front part on Hancock Avenue. Has adjacent parking lot. You can see from the aerial view, there's a building on part of it and an adjacent parking lot. So the request is to allow a surface parking lot within downtown zone, anytime any commercial zone for a surface parking lot to have a new one or expand one. It requires a special use permit. So to have this parking, they would remove an existing structure. I just want to point out this is not about the demolition, though. This is The demolition has been applied for, and it's a separate process of the building. This is for the surface parking lot that would replace the building. And as special use, it would have binding plans and report. The future land use is downtown, as well as the zoning is commercial downtown. Again, it's an existing overhead shot. And the applicant provided some views of going up Doherty Street, as you see with the building there as it is now. Later you'll see it with the building gone as a perspective. And some just shots of the building. Everybody's familiar with the downtown building here. It's got 3 frontages, Hancock, Doherty, and Lumpkin. The site plan here, you would have one new exit onto Doherty Street, onto Lumpkin Street, across from the post office. They would remove the parking spaces between that new exit and Hancock Avenue. Otherwise, they would enter from the existing parking lot on the west side there. And this is perspective, again, the applicant provided, showing how it would look after the building is removed and the parking expanded. There would be a little pocket park there at the corner of Hancock and Lumpkin. And this is a perspective, as we saw earlier with the building there. This is shown, as you can see, the post office pretty prominently as you come up Doherty, as well as other trees, because they would be required when they renovate the parking lots to come up to code with vegetation, with landscaping and shrubbery. The Planning Commission did have somewhat of a tough time. You can see from the pink sheets we sent the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting. It was a split vote. It's 5-3. There was talk about the church doing great service downtown and certainly providing the parking there for pretty much anyone. It sounded like there's not police parking, but that the building was taking a large investment to renovate, and they wanted to remove the building and to use it for something more useful for them. And there has been talk of only 12 spaces added. The applicant did address that by saying not only will they add some parking spaces, but also without the offices there, it would free up more parking for them as well. So, but the recommendation from the Planning Commission is a denial.
Discussion. Ms. Link, this is your district too.
I believe the Planning Commission made the right recommendation here. Anybody who studies smart urban design at all understands that the last thing you want in your downtown core is a surface parking lot. In fact, when we had our downtown master plan done, one of the first things that Jack Crowley did was identify all the surface parking lots in town as places for reasonable future development. This is a historic building. It's 1920. The 2 additions on the back are 1950s. They're not really of significant historic character. I did meet with the church members, with members of the Athens-Clarke Heritage Foundation, and we did take a tour of the building. And that front original building is a really interesting building. It's, of course, been renovated repeatedly, and the original features have been covered up. It seemed to have 2 dropped ceilings. I think there's a real gem underneath there. If those ceilings were removed and the paneling were removed, we have gotten quite a bit of community input, and people don't want to see this building go. And, the church would gain 12 parking spaces. From what I understand, they don't police their current parking lot, so who knows how many spaces they're losing by general members of the public parking in that lot. We did add about 75 or so spaces on Doherty Street, only a block away from the church recently. The church itself is over 100 years old, from an era when probably a lot of people walked a lot farther than that to get to church and to church functions. There's nothing, I cannot think of any reasonable reason to remove a beautiful building like this. It's of such a classic design and form and scale that you see it replicated frequently, even in new buildings. Just a block away, the Chastain Building and the Chamber of Commerce Building have pretty much replicated that same form and similar scale. And it also would come off the tax rolls. Currently, they are renting portions of it out. And there is a great need for downtown office space, especially more affordable office space. And so I feel like that there's a more negative impact in losing that potential rentable space and also, leaving this, gaining some tax revenue from a piece of property that is generating some revenue. So there's nothing in me that can support the special use permit.
Any other, Mr. Hamby?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it seems to me that the comments that we've heard from aren't necessarily about the building per se. It's been more about what they want to put on the property after the building in a parking lot, which I can understand those concerns. But I want to ask Attorney Behrman. So, if the special use is allowed, can you put a time limit on? Can you put an expiration date on that special use permit? For example, I guess I'm trying to get at if the church, because from what I understand, the church doesn't want to leave it a parking lot forever, and they do want to do something with it. They understand that it is an important piece of property, not only for their church but for downtown as well. So could a special use permit include some language that would put a time limit on, perhaps within 2 years a concept could be developed and go from there, so that we know and our constituents know and the people who and the church knows basically what could happen on that, what they want to do and how to go about doing it.
So your idea would be within some period of time, the church would either come back with a concept plan or would come back with actual plans for a building?
Well, either one. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to send a signal that, we certainly don't want this to stay a parking lot forever.
Okay. I'm going to have to research that and get back with you. That's, I just don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, like I said, I don't know that the concerns we've heard are necessarily from the building. It's not in the local historic district. It's outside of the local historic district. So there is that component of it. And it's my understanding the church is costing them an arm and a leg to maintain the building. So, if they're not, that's something to consider. I mean, it's being maintained as best it can now, but if the church decides to all of a sudden vacate the building, what's it going to become then? I mean, they could possibly, they could probably put it on the market and sell it, and somebody could come along and build a big old student high-rise there, I would imagine. And that's certainly something that we don't want to see happen. And I guess I'm trying to figure these things out as well. I don't think the church, they don't have a parking problem. So they're just trying to figure out what to do with it as well. So I'm trying to get to the point.
Mr. Hamby, the ordinance does mention as one of the possible conditions, duration of use. That's pretty brief.
Right.
Duration of use, but I'm not experienced with using such a condition before, but yeah, Bill said we'll look into it and
Okay.
get back to you.
Yeah, it'd be good to know the answer to that and know how we can move forward or not.
Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, haven't experienced anything where we let a special use permit expire after they were using it for that special use. We do have them expire if they don't use it for that special use. But this is a land use problem. This is what this is. This isn't about a church. And to turn this into a parking lot would be a gross disservice. Right now, this is an employment center. There's all kinds of people working in this place. I know the University of Georgia used to lease a pretty big portion of it. I'm not sure that they do now. And that's the appropriate use for this. It's office space at the moment. So it's a real conundrum to allow them to, well, they can tear it down if they want to. We can't stop them. But we might be able to turn it into a parking lot is not a good use of this land.
Mr. Kurtz, and Ms. Bell, and then Link.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, certainly the church is challenged by determining how to use this building well and understand that. A couple members of the congregation are here, and they were very generous with their time and with description of some of the challenges that they have managing the building. Given the value of downtown space generally, and given the number of sort of well-equipped real estate agents and property managers, I would love to see somebody, willing to take the church's challenges off their hands for the period of time necessary in order to find some sort of greater end game, whether that be a larger building that encompasses this parcel, the church's other adjacent parcel, perhaps even eventually the Athens First parcel that they own as well, because they have a slice in between their property and the church's sort of larger linear parking lot. But one of the challenges just with urban planning is ensuring that you've got a vitality, and simply having a storefront or series of door-fronts contributes to that vitality and doesn't produce sort of the urban planning equivalent of a set of broken teeth. So anyhow, we're on television. I'm making the call to folks out there in the real estate and leasing world. I'd love for you to have conversations with the church. When you crunch the numbers, probably the investment that they describe as necessary for stability and for functionality could be recouped in 2 years. So if their end game would be any further out than 2 years, this could probably be a viably retained building with a good manager, obviously. And the church, understandably, isn't in the best position themselves to be the manager of a commercial property.
Ms. Bell, then Ms. Lincoln, then, no, you hadn't spoken. Bell, Link, Hamby.
Can I have my turn now?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We were asked to go on a tour, the commissioners, the mayor, anyone else was asked to go on a tour and meet with the people that are working with this committee. And I chose to go on a Wednesday morning, and we went through the building. We were in there probably 20, 25 minutes. For about 6 or 8, 10 hours after that, my allergies. I was at a place where there was a lot of mold, a heavy duty of a lot of mold. Looking at the building, looking at the inside of it, knowing the cost that they've presented to us on what it will take for them to reshape that building and gut it or whatever is very, very, very expensive. But then when you do that, how much of that old you get out of there would be another factor that I would have to put in the radar, because I do understand the business world. The second part of that, yes, they've had the Boy Scouts. They've had the ministry, Action Ministries. They've had the Samaritan Counseling. They've had the AAs that are part of that building. Well, they've placed them in their sanctuary, in their building, where the actual sanctuary is for First Methodist. That's another part of the identity of First Methodist to me, as to what they do for downtown Athens. They give mission money around the world. They do a lot of things other places, but they do so much for downtown Athens. What they're wanting to do right now is to get rid of an old building that's full of crud. Historically, you look at it, do you look at that as a historic? That's not, to me, that's not the question of what we're talking about. We're talking about the quality of something that's there and what can they do. If they had been told 2 years ago that if they're going to do this, they need to get their steps in place and know what they want to do and whatever, but that was not given as their radar, and right now they're working under their own as they set up. In fact, I remember when I first came on the commission that the head of the committee came to meet with lunch with Madam Mayor and Sharon and I, Commissioner Dickerson and I, and the first thing she said to us, we want to stay downtown. Now, we've lost some other churches from downtown, but we've still got 3 churches in downtown. And they're part of the face of downtown, and that's a part of what First Methodist Church is. But a lot of that face is what they do for downtown. They help so many people in so many ways. They even have a basketball court where the kids that don't have can go and play basketball. It's things like that that I appreciate and love about what this church means to this community. Now, do they know what they want to do tomorrow about this? No, but if we give them some time to put their pieces together, they can come up with some great ideas. It has been mentioned of what they would like to do, maybe as they do put a building. I even mentioned to the young lady that's in charge, would y'all want to do a bridge across, so you wouldn't have to worry about people coming out of church and darting across the street and things like that? Well, that would cost a lot of money, so that probably won't be in their discussion. But it's things like that that I've talked with them, the ones that I know, that their mind's twirling on what they want to do and how they want to do. They've been such a ministry, but they've done it in levels. This is another level. Yes, they need some more parking, but that's not what this is all about. It's not about parking. It's about making a decision of what they need to do with that land that they own, and they have that, I feel like they have that right. So I would like to see us give them the time to put their pieces of the puzzle together with what their church wants to continue with their ministry.
Ms. Link, I'm going to call on Mr. Hamby first, since you've already spoken, then I'll come back to you.
He spoke to
Sure.
you.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Oh, come
It's your turn, Melissa, go ahead.
I just want to point out that this may not be in the local historic district. I believe that they had some objections 10 or so years ago when the local historic district was being laid out, but it is in the National Historic District, and it is listed as a contributing property in the National Historic District. And I believe we'll have some communication from the Heritage Foundation and other historic preservationists about that and about the contribution of this building to the fabric of downtown.
Mr.
Hamby, sure. I guess I would just say, certainly we have this issue before us, and it did not pass the planning commission. And and I know several commissioners haven't spoken, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot from that standpoint, but if I'm just in here thinking about the votes and counting the votes, I mean, certainly if this is denied, the petitioner has to wait a year in order to come back towards it for us for doing something. I just want to make sure that's well known there. So an option before the petitioner may be to withdraw the project if they don't feel comfortable enough with the votes or with what you're hearing here tonight. Then maybe withdraw the project and take some time to develop an idea about what you want to do, and then come back before the planning commission and this body to do this. I'd hate to see something get denied and then you have to wait a year, wasting time to figure out and then also maintain the building at the same time. So just another issue to put on the table.
Mr. Harrod.
Thank you. So I just need to clarify in my mind, they have the right to demolish this
By right.
and leave it as parking, leave it as abandoned land forever. I mean, maybe not forever, but for a considerable amount of time. So, I mean, I don't like to see historic buildings demolished either. But sometimes you got to play the hand you're dealt, not necessarily the hand you wish you had. The other question I had is, and I don't know, I mean, it's in the report it says it's going to cost $900 and something thousand over the next 10 years to maintain this. Given that the building seems to be in kind of, the front bit is older and the back bit is basically post-World War II, is there a possibility of just demolishing the back bit and renovating the front bit? Is that something that they've thought about?
I have no idea because.
Well, that's not really a question for anybody behind the rail, but I know there are some people in the audience.
Right.
That might be a possibility. That might
I had brought that
solve
up
their
too.
problem but also be more acceptable to the community. I don't know.
Could that be? Can I ask a
You
quick
said you
question?
discussed. Excuse me, Melissa said that she had already brought that up. What was the response?
There wasn't really any interest in pursuing it at that time, but I would hope that that could be a reasonable compromise solution.
Madam Mayor, if I could
Yes.
ask, could that be a condition placed in the special use? If that's a discussion that could be had with the church officials, if that's agreeable, could you keep the front part and the front historic part, or the one that is considered historic, and then demolish, and then that's. I mean, I know we can put conditions on things, but
It
I
would
ju- I
require
just
changing the plan.
change it. Okay, never mind then.
I mean, we would lose that we'd lose the exit on Doherty for one thing. I mean, keep saying Doherty, on Lumpkin, across from the post office, but they'd have to rearrange the access. A lot. But I do want to say earlier too, on the year way, that's just for rezonings. So that's for actual rezoning, like plan developments and rezonings, not for special uses.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know, too.
Any other
Mayor,
concession
I
discussion?
guess I just like to, I went on the tour with, I guess, Diane. And I guess I'd just like to say, I mean, obviously, the church knows their building, and from what I gathered from the discussion that we had, they're basically bleeding. I mean, this facility is sucking all their resources out, just trying to maintain it, and they are doing a service to the community downtown. I see this as an interim solution. I mean, I did not gather from them that this is what they intended to use this property for in the future. They're just looking to stop the bleeding and then address it with their church and make some decisions about what they're going to do with that property that benefit the mission of their church and would benefit the downtown area. And I think they've been very diligent in asking for input from the public over, meeting with us over the last couple of years. But, everybody knows church politics are worse than our politics sometimes, just trying to get people at the table and talk about things, when you're talking about what to do with resources. So, I guess my comment is they made it very clear. I think the maintenance person was with us that day, made it very clear that they're bleeding, and this is not a good use of their resources. We wouldn't do this to ourselves. I don't think we should do it to an applicant either.
Ms. Lang?
Yeah, as the commissioner for this district, I was not invited to those early supposed public input meetings. I feel like we could have come up with a more viable solution to whatever issues are at hand if, we had a little more inclusive input in those early stages. Perhaps bringing someone like Jack Crowley in who knows downtown inside and out because he did create the downtown master plan.
He's Catholic.
So am I. So I just feel like there was some opportunity lost at the beginning. I feel like, there could have, a plan could have been come up with that could have prevent the loss of what is an important building. It's a unique building in downtown. We don't have a lot of buildings from that era, from 1920s. And answer some of the parking problems, and still maintain some of that valuable commercial space that we do need desperately downtown. Any quick consultation with anyone at our economic development department would tell you that, there's a great demand for this kind of office space.
Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm sort of reserving my comments because the next item is that next lot up there, and I sort of wanted to get the whole picture, right? The next item on here?
39.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to get that input so I can get the whole picture of it, right? So when you go to the next item, you're going to talk about that lot that's right above what's dark there.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
right above the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, I think that's causing some confusion because we've got two different things. One is to just change a designation from government to downtown.
He hasn't gone over that yet.
Downtown. And whether or not they tear the building down is not even on the agenda tonight. That's not a decision
I understand
that
that.
we can make.
I understand that, yeah.
But, I mean, I know you do. I think there's some confusion because I got a number of emails from people that said, don't let them tear the building down. We don't want the building torn down, and that's not even a decision that we're at liberty of making. So,
Yeah, the only way to do that would be to put a moratorium and include it in the local historic district. That's the only step you could take. It's in the demolition review process right now. Commissioner Link has put a 9-day hold on it. And that's the only way after, before that 9 days is up.
When is that up? Do you know? Is it January?
It's like late January.
Late January.
And so, in the meantime, you'd have to put a moratorium on, like you've done in other districts, and include it in local historic district. That's the only way you would stop the demolition. Yeah. And it was considered, as Commissioner Link mentioned, it was considered before as part of the local historic district, but it was removed. As I understand, the applicant said this at the Planning Commission meeting because he consulted with Mr. Jim Warrens, and Jim had remembered that he thought it was because of the stucco on the outside of the building that it replaced, may have been brick before, but because the old part was covered in stucco, that had a big impact on the local historic district, where it may have been contributing earlier before the stucco was applied, that may have affected the contributing structure status.
Mr. Harrod, do you have something more to
Well,
say?
I'm kind of going back to this. I mean, it's sort of one building, but of two different historical time periods.
Really,
And so-
yes, two buildings really put together.
Yeah, which functions as a building now,
Yeah.
but, you know, built 30 or 40, the two parts were built, you know, maybe 30 or 40 years apart from each other. So I guess my question is, in a situation like that, would the whole building be considered historic, or just the
Yeah,
part
they're-
that goes back to the 1920s?
I believe they're both older than 50 years, so that's the
Oh, they
local
are?
story. That's the 50-year-old age that they
Okay.
cut off. So we would definitely send both parts to you guys for demolition review.
Anybody else have anything to say? Because if you don't, I do. I just want to express, you know, I'm leaving in January, so I may or may not have a say in this, but to me, it is just unconscionable for us to impose a cost on the church that they feel they can't afford to maintain a building that is not healthy, it's not a viable building, and to impose that on them because somebody else wants to tell them what to do with their land. It's you know, it's not in a historic district. They can tear it down by right, and it will not stay a surface parking lot long. The value of property downtown is well over $1 million an acre. So there will be partners that will come in to partner with them, or something will happen to this building that's going to be beneficial to downtown. And they've been good citizens. They provided free services to all kinds of nonprofits over the years. They're still doing that because they're still housing all those nonprofits. They've not thrown them out. And as far as, you know, affordable rent, I don't believe, and this is an opinion, and it's probably not the best way to phrase this, that anybody could come in there and properly renovate that building and rent it for below normal rents downtown. Anything that's done there, it's not going to be low rent retail property. And what's there now is certainly not the highest and best use for either the church or the community. Yes,
Can I
sir.
point out one thing? This is a special use permit application. It's not a rezoning. And so you sit in the quasi judicial capacity, and you are required to follow and apply the ordinance standards, which are listed on pages 447 and 448 of the staff report. So there are standards that you have to apply, like for churches, for fraternities and sororities, schools, that sort of thing. It's a little bit different from a straight rezone.
But we're not even talking about rezoning. We're talking about special use permit for to go to parking, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And anybody else before we move forward? Okay. We've got item number 38.
Okay, and this is coming to you, basically, it was triggered by the First Methodist Church, the application, the last application we talked about, because this is next door. Where we're looking at that, and they wanted to combine all these properties together, and we discovered that this was still government zoned, although it transferred way back in, I think, '07. And so basically, this is an update, trying to update the zoning to make it a private, to show the private ownership, to go from government to downtown for future land use, and from government to CD for the zoning. And you're familiar with the location, I'll pass through that. It did transfer in '07, so there's two votes on this, future land use and then the zoning. And it's right now, the only government zoning in that block. And so the Planning Commission recommends approval of both of those. It's just a cleanup item.
Okay. This is related, but is there any more discussion?
Yeah, I was trying to, can you go back to that picture, Bruce, of
the, I think it shows the existing parking lot. There we go. So that's currently the only changes, so that then the whole block would be
Commercial,
CD.
Yeah,
Okay, so like you said, it's sort of cleaning up, it's like a little island that
yeah.
isn't been government for a long time.
Yeah,
Okay,
normally we try to catch these earlier, it's just, for whatever reason, it's just now being caught because of the First Methodist Church action, so.
okay. And then, okay. And then that's that came out and unanimous from the Planning Commission
Right.
to approve that. Thank you.
Okay, move on to item, and one of the things that probably needs to be pointed out is these two are not interrelated. One's not related to the other one.
One's
They
a
can be done
rezoning, right.
independently. Yeah.
Yeah, one's special use and one's a rezoning. They're just, they want to connect the properties together if they
Right.
get the approval, yeah.
Yeah.
The next for you is another cleanup item. This is along Cherokee Road and Beaver Dam Road. It was single-family residential, and during your future land use map adoption this past summer, for some reason, it got changed to rural. It does have AR zoning, but there was no intent. It was just inadvertently changed back to rural. It has been single-family residential since at least 2000 for future development or future land use. It does have the airport overlay over the top part of the block, but this is mainly a single-family subdivision area, small lots already. The main thing and again, this is something that was brought to us because someone along Beaver Dam wants to split their property, and looking into it, we said we need to rezone it. And then first we were like, it's just a type 2, and then we discovered, well, no, actually it's a type 1 now. So yeah, we're doing this to clean it up and, doing a whole countywide future land use map adoption. Kind of thought somewhere along there is going to be something that comes up, and this is the one, hopefully the only one that pops up as just an inadvertent change during that whole countywide adoption. But this is several parcels, and again, this is the correct future land use map, reestablish that single-family residential designation that was there for 18 years. It's compatible with the single-family subdivision on most of that block, as well as the available sanitary sewer that runs through the middle of the block. The existing zoning will not change. I want to emphasize that. This is just a future land use change. We had a lot of concern about taxation. We checked with our tax assessor's office. Future land use changes did not affect property tax evaluation, so that was a big concern out there. But it will help someone who would want to rezone for smaller parcels, especially on Beaver Dam, where there's some parcels there would now have sewer possibility. Some tracts there could be developed with some small subdivisions. So being again a correction, going back to what it was for 18 years, the Planning Commission did recommend approval.
Any questions, concerns? Okay. We have text amendment number 40.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right, we have two text amendments before you tonight. The first one is basically a catch-up of our code to something that's changed with the state allowance for plats to be recorded. They've gone, as things tend to go nowadays, gone digital. And so we're catching up here by basically going along with the state law, allowing those digital recordings. This is basically something we're already doing, and so we're trying to get this into our code, where there's a digital portal to the Office of Clerk Superior Court. A digital copy is provided back to the Planning Department. So basically, this is an update to show how we're currently handling our plast.
Questions? Okay. 41 is another text amendment.
Okay, and this is in multifamily dwellings in commercial zones. A couple of different amendments here. The first one is regarding the commercial space. We're trying to get that true mixed use downtown. We've seen, a lot of student apartments being built, and we're trying to find ways of actually getting instead of a locked, gated, coded access, actually getting a public entity on the bottom floor. And so basically the big thing here is we're saying if you want to count it as your 50% commercial space, which is required, first of all, it shouldn't be your access, your gated code access to your residential dwellings. That should be a separate way to get to those. And then it needs to have a publicly accessible building entrance. We're now seeing with the Uncommon, they're getting a commercial use on the ground floor. It'll have its own doors, public accessible doors. That's what we're looking for, the Wells Fargo at the Fred Building, things like that. We're looking for that real mixed-use building, and hopefully this will help spur that on. And then the other part of that text amendment is that bottom part where it says no more than 25% of the total number of dwelling units shall have 4 or more bedrooms. Right now, that's in the RM zones, but we don't have it in our C zones. So this is to kind of make the slate even, everything even there, and limit the 4-bedroom apartments, especially like downtown. That concludes the Planning Commission report.
Rick, I want to double check, make sure I understand. We're not prohibiting 4 bedrooms, but just 4-bedroom, 4-bath configurations. Is that right?
Well, we're limiting them to 25%. So of your total number of dwelling units, only 25% of them can be 4-bedroom. So of your 1 and 2 and 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom.
And are we prohibiting the 4-bedroom, 4-bath configuration?
We don't have that in there.
We don't have that in there?
No.
Okay.
I noticed like the varsity overlay being proposed has something a little more about bathroom ratios. We don't have that in here at this time. So right now, we're just going with what the RM zones have at this time.
Well, for future reference, when I went to Tuscaloosa for a totally unrelated issue, they were having some of the same issues we were having downtown, of it being dominated by student apartments in some areas. And so they prohibited in their downtown area the 4-bedroom, 4-bath configuration.
Yeah.
Which it tends to be rented by the bedroom rather than
Exactly.
apartment.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that the first time I really noticed that was in the varsity overlay language, and that's something certainly y'all could consider, a bedroom bathroom ratio certainly.
Yeah. And that could hopefully encourage more professional family uses.
I think that was the intent of the varsity. Yeah.
Okay. I believe that wraps us up. 95